I felt it first while adjusting my portfolio strap, that hard knot pressing against my fingertips at the base of my neck. The college photography exhibition was just 3 days away, my biggest opportunity yet. But this lump sent ice through my veins. At dinner, I finally gathered courage to show my mother, Sarah, and father, Robert, pulling my hair aside with trembling fingers. Mom's face hardened instantly, her fork clattering against her plate as she declared I was manufacturing drama for attention before my show. Dad nodded along, insisting I had always been theatrical when important events approached. They shifted conversation to Tyler's football scholarship, while I sat there, my pulse hammering against that terrifying mass beneath my skin. The next morning, I slipped away from my dormitory before Jessica, my roommate, woke up. The campus health center smelled like disinfectant, and fear making my stomach churn as I signed in with shaking hands. Dr. Martinez, a woman with gentle brown eyes, examined the lump with increasingly concerned expressions, her fingers probing carefully around the mass that had haunted my thoughts all night. "Florence, I need to send you for an ultrasound immediately," she said, typing rapidly into her computer. "This requires urgent evaluation." The ultrasound waiting room felt like a tomb. Other students browsed their phones casually while I pressed my palm against my neck, feeling that unwelcome intruder beneath my skin. The technician, a young man named Bradley, initially chatted about the weather, but his demeanor shifted the moment he placed the probe against my neck. His cheerful expression vanished, replaced by professional focus as he captured image after image, occasionally calling out measurements in medical terminology I couldn't understand. "I need to grab Dr. Patel for a second opinion," Bradley said, avoiding my eyes as he left the room. Dr. Patel arrived within minutes, her white coat pristine and her expression carefully neutral. She studied the screen intently, occasionally directing Bradley to capture specific angles. Their hushed conversation included words like irregular borders and vascular involvement that made my blood run cold. After what felt like hours, Dr. Patel sat beside me, her voice kind but firm. "Florence, we need to refer you to an oncologist as soon as possible. The mass shows concerning characteristics that require specialist evaluation." The word oncologist hit me like a physical blow. Cancer. They were worried about cancer. At 20 years old, with my whole life stretching ahead, that word felt impossible, surreal. Dr. Martinez met me back in her office with a referral packet, her face grave as she explained the urgency. She scheduled an appointment with Dr. Nathaniel Green, supposedly the best oncologic surgeon in the state, for the following week. "Don't wait on this, Florence. Promise me you'll follow through," Dr. Martinez insisted, pressing the papers into my hands. I drove home in a daze, the referral documents on my passenger seat feeling heavier than my camera equipment. The house stood quiet in the afternoon sun, Mom's car absent from the driveway. I should have waited, should have prepared better for this conversation, but fear drove me inside, clutching those papers like a lifeline. The front door hadn't even closed behind me when Mom appeared from the kitchen, her expression shifting from surprise to suspicion as she spotted the medical center envelope in my hands. Before I could speak, she snatched the papers, her eyes scanning rapidly through the medical terminology and urgent recommendations. "Oncologist Florence, what have you done?" Her voice rose with each word, color draining from her perfectly made-up face. "Mom, the doctors said the lump needs immediate evaluation. They're concerned about making money off gullible college students." Sarah's hands moved faster than I could react, tearing the referral into pieces. "These campus doctors get kickbacks for every specialist referral. It's a racket, Florence. I can't believe you fell for this." I watched in growing horror as she strode to the living room fireplace, those crucial papers crumbling in her manicured fingers. The flames consumed my diagnosis, my referral, my proof that something was terribly wrong. Orange light danced across her face as she fed each piece to the fire, her jaw set with determination. "Mom, please, I need those papers. The lump is real, I can feel it growing." She whirled on me, her blue eyes blazing with an intensity that made me step backward. "You've always done this, Florence. Every major event, every important moment for this family, you manufacture some crisis to steal the spotlight." Your brother's scholarship announcement is next week, and suddenly you have a mysterious lump. How convenient. This isn't about Tyler. This is about my health. The front door opened and Dad entered, immediately sensing the tension. Mom explained the situation in clipped tones, painting me as a hypochondriac, seeking attention through false medical scares. Dad's face darkened as he listened, his briefcase hitting the floor with unnecessary force. $2,000, Florence. That's what your little stunt at the health center cost us today. $2,000 for unnecessary tests because you can't handle your brother succeeding. The accusation stung worse than any physical pain. They truly believed I would fabricate illness for attention, that I was so petty and desperate that I'd invent a tumor to overshadow my younger brother. Tears burned my eyes as I pressed my hand against the lump, feeling its undeniable presence. Feel it, then. If you think I'm lying, feel it yourselves. Neither moved toward me. Mom turned back to the fireplace, ensuring every scrap of medical documentation had burned to ash. Dad loosened his tie, his voice taking on the lecturing tone I'd heard throughout my childhood whenever I disappointed them. Your mother and I work ourselves to exhaustion maintaining this family's reputation and stability. We've sacrificed everything to give you and Tyler opportunities we never had. And this is how you repay us, with attention-seeking behavior that could damage our standing in the community. Having a medical condition isn't attention-seeking. Having a condition and imagining one are very different things, Mom interjected, brushing ash from her hands. You're anxious about your exhibition, about graduating next year, about adult responsibilities. That's normal. What's not normal is inventing medical emergencies to avoid dealing with reality. The lump throbbed as if responding to their denial, a steady pulse of wrongness at the base of my neck. But standing there, watching the last wisps of smoke carry away my medical proof, I realized argumentation was futile. They'd made their decision before I'd even walked through the door. In their minds, I was the dramatic daughter who couldn't let her brother shine, who needed constant attention and validation. I'm keeping my follow-up appointment, I said quietly, though I knew the words were hollow without insurance approval or parental support. Dad's laugh held no humor. With what insurance you're on our plan, Florence? No specialist will see you without our authorization, and we're not authorizing treatment for imaginary conditions. Mom smoothed her skirt, already moving past this conversation in her mind. Dinner will be at 6. We're having Tyler's coach over to discuss scholarship details, so please wear something appropriate and try to be supportive of your brother for once. They left me standing there, the smell of burned paper still hanging in the air. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica asking about my whereabouts, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. How could I explain that my parents had literally burned my cancer screening referral, that they'd rather maintain their perfect family image than acknowledge their daughter might be seriously ill? I climbed the stairs to my childhood bedroom, each step feeling monumental. The lump pulsed with my heartbeat, a constant reminder of the betrayal downstairs. Through my window, I watched our suburban street carry on with normal life. Neighbors walking dogs, children riding bicycles, families who probably believed their parents would protect them from harm. The exhibition didn't matter anymore. My photography, my dreams, my entire future had compressed down to this thing growing inside my neck, and parents who refused to see it. I touched the lump again, mapping its edges, trying to convince myself it hadn't grown since morning. But deep down, I knew the truth that my parents had just incinerated, along with those medical documents. Something was terribly wrong, and I was running out of time. 3 days after the burning incident, I woke to find a note slipped under my door. Dad's precise handwriting announced a mandatory family meeting at 4 o'clock sharp. No explanation, just the time, and a warning that attendance wasn't optional. My stomach clenched as I read it, the lump at my neck seeming to pulse with fresh anxiety. The morning dragged endlessly. I attempted to focus on my exhibition preparations, but my hands shook too badly to properly adjust my camera settings. Diana at Morrison Gallery called twice about the final setup, but I let it go to voicemail. How could I explain that my parents had scheduled a family tribunal that took precedence over my career? At 5 minutes to 4, I descended the stairs to find the living room arranged like a courtroom. Dad sat in his leather recliner, a manila folder balanced on his knee. Mom perched on the sofa's edge, her posture rigid with purpose. Tyler slouched in the corner armchair, still wearing his football practice jersey, confusion evident in his expression. "Sit," Dad commanded, pointing to the ottoman that placed me at the center of their semicircle. The folder opened to reveal printed pages, WebMD articles, psychiatric journals, blog posts about hypochondria. Mom had highlighted passages in yellow, her notations filling the margins in her schoolteacher script. My mouth went dry as I recognized the hours of research they'd compiled to diagnose me with mental illness, rather than acknowledge the physical mass growing in my neck. "Florence, your mother and I have spent considerable time understanding your situation." Dad began his tone, mimicking the patient voice he used with difficult clients. "We've consulted resources about medical anxiety in young women your age." Mom leaned forward, her perfume overwhelming in the closed space. "It's more common than you'd think, sweetheart. Young women facing major life transitions often manifest physical symptoms as a cry for help. The mind is powerful. It can create sensations that feel completely real. The lump is real," I stated flatly, my hand instinctively moving toward my neck before I forced it back to my lap. "Of course it feels real to you," Mom continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "That's what makes psychosomatic conditions so challenging. Your brain has convinced your body that something exists." Tyler shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting between our parents and me. At 18, he still held on to the belief that our parents acted in our best interests, that faith would crumble today, though he didn't know it yet. Dad cleared his throat, moving to the next phase of their intervention. "We've made some decisions for your well-being, Florence. First, we've modified your health insurance coverage. Specialist visits are no longer covered without explicit approval from your primary physician, who must go through us first." The words hit like physical blows. They were systematically cutting off my access to medical care, building walls between me and any hope of treatment. My fingers curled into fists, nails biting into my palms as I fought to maintain composure. "You can't do that. I'm 20 years old. I'm an adult." "An adult still on our insurance plan," Dad countered smoothly. "An adult whose education we finance, whose housing we supplement, whose entire life we support. With that support comes certain guidelines." Mom produced another document, this one, bearing the letterhead of our family physician, Dr. Harold Montgomery, a man who'd attended their dinner parties for 15 years, whose daughter had been in Tyler's graduating class. His loyalty to my parents far exceeded any medical oath. "Dr. Montgomery agrees that your symptoms are stress-related. He's prescribed a mild anti-anxiety medication and recommends counseling for your attention-seeking behaviors. He hasn't even examined me." The words exploded out, my careful control shattering. How can he prescribe anything without seeing the lump? Because there is no lump. Dad's patience evaporated, his face flushing red. "There's a stressed young woman who can't handle her brother's success, who needs to create drama to remain the center of attention." Tyler flinched at the accusation, his confusion deepening. "What's going on, Flor? Are you sick?" "Tyler, your sister is experiencing psychological difficulties." Mom explained, her tone suggesting she was protecting him from ugly truths. "It's nothing for you to worry about. Focus on your scholarship meetings." The dismissal of my brother's concerns sparked fresh rage. They were painting me as the unstable sister, the family burden who couldn't celebrate others' achievements without manufacturing crisis. Tyler would remember this version of events, would carry their narrative forward unless I could make him see truth. "Feel my neck," I said directly to Tyler, ignoring our parents' sharp intakes of breath. "Right here at the base. Feel it yourself and tell me it's imaginary." Tyler started to rise, but Dad's sharp command froze him mid-motion. "Tyler, sit down. We don't indulge delusions. It only makes them worse." "Robert's right." Mom added quickly. Participating in Florence's fantasy would be enabling harmful behavior. We have to show tough love. The phone rang, shattering the tension. Mom glanced at the caller ID, her lips pursing with annoyance. "It's your Aunt Margaret." Again. "Don't answer," Dad instructed, though Mom had already declined the call. "We don't need her interfering with family matters." Aunt Margaret. Mom's younger sister, who lived 3 states away, who sent birthday cards with handwritten notes and called every Sunday without fail. The sister Mom rarely discussed, whose photos had mysteriously vanished from family albums over the years. A cold suspicion crept through my mind as I watched Mom silence the phone. "Why is Aunt Margaret calling?" I asked, noting the guilty glance my parents exchanged. "She's been having some health issues. Nothing serious," Mom said too quickly, her fingers worrying at her wedding ring. "Just her usual dramatics." The lie hung obvious in the air, but before I could pursue it, Dad returned to his agenda. He produced a final document, this one requiring my signature. The text swam before my eyes. Something about voluntary agreement to family health decisions, acknowledgement of anxiety disorders, consent for modified insurance terms. "Sign it, Florence. Accept help. Stop this destructive behavior before it ruins your future." My future. You're denying me medical care for a growth that could be killing me, and you're worried about my future. The words triggered something in Mom. She stood abruptly, her composure cracking to reveal raw emotion beneath. "Nobody is dying. Nobody in this family is sick. We are healthy, successful people who don't create problems where none exist." Her vehemence startled even Dad. Tyler shrank back in his chair, recognizing Mom's rare but terrifying temper. I'd seen it only twice before. Once when a teacher suggested Tyler might have learning disabilities, and once when a neighbor asked if our family had a history of mental illness. Both times she'd reacted as if personally attacked, as if the mere suggestion of imperfection was unbearable. Sarah, Dad warned, but Mom was beyond restraint. "I won't have it, Robert. I won't have people whispering about us, pitying us, treating us like we're damaged goods. We've worked too hard to build this life, this reputation. I won't let her destroy it with her need for attention." The outburst revealed more than hours of calm manipulation could have. This wasn't about money or insurance or even believing I was lying. This was about image, about the perfect family facade they'd constructed and would protect at any cost. My health. My life meant nothing compared to their social standing. Tyler found his voice quiet but persistent. What if she's not lying, though? What if there really is something wrong? The question hung suspended in the sudden silence. For a moment, I saw fear flicker across Mom's face. Not fear for me, but fear of the possibility itself. Then Dad's hand came down on the arm of his chair with finality. "There is nothing wrong except what Florence has created in her mind. This discussion is over." But it wasn't over. Not when the phone rang again, Aunt Margaret's number lighting up the screen with persistence that suggested urgency beyond casual checking in. Not when Mom's hands trembled as she powered off the phone entirely. Not when I caught Dad glancing at my neck with something that might have been doubt before his expression hardened again. "We've also contacted your school," Dad announced, the punishment continuing. "They've been informed that you're receiving private family care for anxiety-related issues. Any attempts to seek treatment through campus services will be reported to us immediately." The trap was complete. They'd cut off every avenue, blocked every path to help. Insurance, campus health, even Dr. Montgomery, all aligned against me. I sat on that ottoman, feeling the walls close in the lump, throbbing with each panicked heartbeat. "This is abuse." I whispered the words, falling into space between us like stones into deep water. Mom laughed sharp and bitter. "Abuse. We're saving you from yourself, Florence. Someday you'll thank us for stopping this spiral before it consumed you. Someday you'll realize what you've done," I countered, standing on unsteady legs. "When it's too late, when this thing has spread beyond fixing, you'll remember this moment." "Enough dramatics," Dad said wearily. Sign the paper or pack your things. Those are your options. The ultimatum hung clear: compliance or homelessness. Submit to their version of reality or lose everything. I looked at Tyler, hoping to find an ally, but his face showed only confusion and the beginning of doubt. Their poison was already working, painting me as the unstable element in our perfect family dynamic. I signed the paper with numb fingers, each letter of my name a small death. They'd won this round, forced my hand through financial coercion and systematic isolation. But as I climbed back to my room, I pressed my fingers against the lump and made a promise. Somehow, someway, I would find help. Their denial couldn't change biology, couldn't stop whatever was growing inside me. Through my window, I watched Aunt Margaret's name appear once more on Mom's phone screen before she blocked the number entirely. Whatever secrets they were keeping, whatever history they were desperate to bury, it was worth more to them than their daughter's life. That truth hurt worse than any tumor ever could. The morning sun streaming through Morrison Gallery's floor-to-ceiling windows usually energized me, but 3 weeks after the family meeting, I could barely lift my camera bag from my car. Each piece of equipment felt like it weighed 50 pounds, though I knew my Nikon setup hadn't changed. What had changed was my body's ability to carry what had once been effortless. Diana emerged from her office as I struggled with the tripod case, her keen artistic eye immediately cataloging details others might miss. The gallery owner possessed an uncanny ability to read people, like installations deconstructing their pieces to understand the whole. Today her gaze lingered on my neck, though I'd carefully arranged a silk scarf to hide the growing mass. "Florence, darling, you look exhausted. The Henderson wedding shoot isn't until 2. Why don't you rest in the back office?" I forced brightness into my voice, adjusting the scarf as casually as possible. "Just didn't sleep well. Pre-show jitters, you know." Diana's expression suggested she knew nothing of the sort, but she allowed the lie to stand. The Henderson wedding, a coup for a student photographer arranged through Diana's connections. The mother of the bride had specifically requested the young artist with the emotional eye after seeing my portfolio. 6 months ago, I would have been ecstatic. Now I wondered if I'd survive the 8-hour shoot. The morning crawled by as I attempted to organize equipment for the wedding. My hands trembled while switching lenses, and twice I had to sit down when dark spots danced across my vision. The fatigue went bone deep, unlike anything I'd experienced before. Not the exhaustion of all-nighters or final exams, but something systemic, as if my body was dividing its resources between basic function and fighting an internal war. "Florence, could you grab the reflector kit from the storage room?" Diana called from the front desk where she was finalizing contracts. The storage room sat at the back of the gallery, perhaps 30 feet away. 6 months ago, I would have jogged there without thought. Now those 30 feet stretched like a marathon. I gripped the wall for support, willing my legs to cooperate. The reflector kit sat on a shelf at eye level, but lifting my arms to reach it sent shooting pains through my neck and shoulders. "Let me get that." Diana appeared beside me, her expression no longer politely concerned, but genuinely alarmed. She retrieved the kit easily, then placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. The touch was meant to be comforting, but I couldn't suppress a wince as her fingers grazed the edge of the swollen area. "Florence, what's really going on? And please don't insult my intelligence with more lies about poor sleep." The kindness in her voice nearly broke me. Here was an adult who actually saw my declining condition, who cared enough to push past polite fiction. But the family meeting's threats echoed in my mind. Any attempt to seek help would result in losing my housing, my education, my future. "I'm just under a lot of stress. Family stuff, you know how it is." Diana studied me with those artist's eyes, reading the story written in my pallor, my careful movements, the way I unconsciously protected my neck. "I know that whatever's happening, you're not getting the support you need. My door is always open, Florence. Always." The Henderson wedding shoot became a test of endurance. The bride Charlotte glowed with happiness while I struggled to hold my camera steady. During the ceremony, I braced myself against architectural elements, a column here, a railing there, disguising my weakness as artistic positioning. The reception proved worse with heavy equipment changes and constant movement through crowded spaces. "You're incredibly talented," Mrs. Henderson gushed during a break in formal photos, "though you look rather pale, dear. Are you feeling all right?" Her motherly concern almost undid my composure. Here was a stranger showing more care for my well-being than my own parents. I mumbled something about the heat and escaped to the bathroom, where I confronted my reflection. The scarf had shifted during the shoot, revealing the mass that now distorted the natural line of my neck. No longer a lump, but a visible growth, angry and swollen, impossible to dismiss as imagination. I adjusted the scarf with shaking hands, applied more concealer to the bruise-like discoloration spreading from the site, and returned to finish the shoot through sheer will. Every photo cost me each smile I coaxed from the wedding party, paid for with my diminishing reserves. By the time I packed up my equipment, my entire body screamed with exhaustion. The drive back to my apartment required 3 stops, twice to rest when dizziness threatened my ability to navigate traffic, once to vomit quietly behind a gas station. The nausea had started a week ago, sporadic at first, but increasing in frequency. Another symptom my parents would dismiss as psychosomatic, another sign my body was betraying me while they remained steadfast in their denial. Jessica was studying at the kitchen table when I stumbled through our apartment door. My roommate looked up from her nursing textbooks, her trained eyes immediately assessing my condition. We'd been randomly paired freshman year, but had chosen to continue living together through genuine friendship. She knew about my family's quirks, though not the full extent of their current cruelty. "Florence, you look like death. Sit down before you fall down." I collapsed onto our secondhand couch, too exhausted to maintain pretenses. Jessica abandoned her studying to bring me water, her movements efficient with medical training. She perched on the coffee table, watching me struggle to take small sips without triggering more nausea. "How long has this been going on? Really going on, not whatever story you've been telling people." "Since I found the lump, it's getting worse, Jess. Everything's getting worse." Jessica reached for my neck, but I caught her wrist. "Don't. If you feel it, if you confirm it's real, I'll fall apart. And I can't afford to fall apart right now." "You can't afford not to get treatment, Florence. Whatever's going on with your parents, your health has to come first." They removed specialist coverage from my insurance, convinced our family doctor I'm having psychological problems, told the campus health center I'm receiving private care for anxiety. I'm trapped, Jess. Completely trapped. Jessica's expression cycled through disbelief, anger, and determination. "That's medical neglect. It's abuse. There are resources, legal options." "With what money? What lawyer they pay for everything? My apartment, my tuition, my food. Without them, I have nothing. I lose my education, my future, everything I've worked for." "Without treatment, you might lose your life." The words hung between us, stark truth neither of us had voiced before. Jessica was right, of course. Every day brought new symptoms, fresh evidence of my body's losing battle. But the trap my parents had constructed was perfect in its simplicity. Seek help and lose everything, or stay silent and potentially die. "I'm trying to find a way." I whispered, exhaustion making honesty easier. "Diana knows something's wrong. Maybe she has connections. Maybe there's some way to get help without going through official channels." Jessica squeezed my hand, her nursing instincts clearly warring with friendship's limitations. "What about your brother, your extended family? There has to be someone who can help." "Tyler's starting to doubt me thanks to our parents' campaign. And my Aunt Margaret, something happened there. Mom blocked her number after she kept calling during the family meeting. There's history, I don't understand something they're desperate to hide." We sat in silence as twilight painted our small living room in purple shadows. The lump throbbed with my pulse, a constant reminder of time. Passing cells, dividing, chances diminishing. Soon the scarf wouldn't be enough to hide it. Soon the fatigue would prevent me from working at all. Soon the choice between silence and survival would be made for me by simple biology. "Promise me something," Jessica said finally, her voice fierce with protective anger. "If you collapse, if something happens that requires emergency treatment, you let them treat you. Don't protect your parents' reputation at the cost of your life." I nodded, though we both knew how little control I might have in such a situation. The wedding photos waited on my memory cards, beautiful moments captured while I deteriorated behind the lens. Art created, while dying beauty preserved by someone whose own body was betraying her. There was poetry in that, though not the kind I'd ever wanted to write. Grandmother Eleanor arrived for her 75th birthday celebration on a Thursday afternoon, her silver Mercedes pulling into our driveway with the practiced precision of someone who'd made this journey countless times. From my bedroom window, I watched Dad rush out to help with her luggage, his movements unusually hurried. Mom stood in the doorway, her smile fixed, but tense arms crossed over her chest in a posture I recognized as defensive. I'd been looking forward to Grandmother's visit for weeks. Unlike my parents, she possessed a sharp pragmatism that cut through pretense. If anyone could see through their denial, could force them to acknowledge the truth written in my declining health, it would be Eleanor. The scarf around my neck had been replaced by a turtleneck despite the warm spring weather, the mass now too large for silk to disguise. "Florence, come help your grandmother settle in." Mom's voice carried up the stairs with false cheerfulness. I descended carefully, gripping the banister as dizziness threatened my balance. 3 days had passed since the Henderson wedding, and my body hadn't recovered from the exertion. Diana had insisted I take time off her concern, evident despite my attempts at reassurance. The gallery felt like my only safe space, now the one place where someone saw my struggle without judgment. Grandmother Eleanor stood in our foyer, her steel-gray hair perfectly coiffed, her bearing regal despite her age. Those sharp blue eyes, the same shade as Mom's but infinitely warmer, found me immediately. Her expression shifted, cataloging changes with the thoroughness of someone who'd raised 3 children and buried a husband. She opened her arms for an embrace, and I fell into them gratefully. My darling girl," she murmured against my hair, "let me look at you properly." She held me at arm's length, those keen eyes missing nothing. The weight loss, the pallor, the careful way I held my head to minimize pain. Her fingers ghosted near my neck, not quite touching, but clearly noting the turtleneck in spring. When her gaze met mine again, I saw knowledge there, terrible understanding that made my throat tight with unshed tears. "Eleanor, you must be exhausted from the drive," Mom interjected quickly. "Your room is ready and dinner will be at 6. "Sarah, I've driven here from Richmond dozens of times. I'm perfectly fine." Grandmother's tone brooked no argument. Florence was about to show me her latest photography work, weren't you, dear? It wasn't a question. I nodded, grateful for the excuse to escape my parents' suffocating presence. Grandmother linked her arm through mine, her grip surprisingly strong as she provided subtle support for my unsteady gait. We made our way to the converted garage that served as my makeshift studio, leaving my parents exchanging worried glances behind us. Once inside the studio, away from watching eyes, Grandmother's facade crumbled. She guided me to sit on the worn love seat I'd rescued from a yard sale, then settled beside me with careful movements that belied her age. Her hand found mine, paper-dry skin, warm and comforting. "Show me," she said simply. I knew what she meant. With trembling fingers, I pulled down the turtleneck's collar, revealing what I'd hidden for weeks. The mass distorted my neck's natural lines, swollen and angry-looking, with veins visible beneath stretched skin. Grandmother's intake of breath was sharp-pained, but she didn't look away. Instead, she studied it with the same unflinching gaze she'd once used to assess skinned knees and childhood injuries. "How long?" "I found it 2 months ago. It's grown significantly since then." "And your parents?" "They burned my referral to an oncologist, said I'm making it up for attention, that it's all in my head. They've blocked me from getting treatment, convinced everyone I'm having psychological problems." Grandmother's face went very still, a dangerous kind of quiet I'd rarely seen from her. Her fingers tightened around mine as she visibly struggled with some internal battle. Finally, she spoke, her voice heavy with the weight of secrets. "Florence, I need to tell you." Dad's voice cut through the moment like a blade. He stood in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral, but his posture rigid with warning. "Robert's on the phone from Seattle. He wanted to wish you happy birthday." "Robert can wait," Grandmother said firmly. "I'm speaking with my granddaughter." "It's international. The connection is poor. You should take it now." They stared at each other, some silent communication passing between them that I couldn't decipher. Grandmother's jaw worked as if she were chewing words too dangerous to speak. Finally, she rose, squeezing my shoulder as she passed. "We'll continue this later, Florence, I promise." But we wouldn't. I realized that as I watched Dad escort her back to the house, his hand firm on her elbow, his head bent close to hers in urgent conversation. Whatever Grandmother had been about to reveal, Dad would ensure she stayed silent. The family secrets would remain buried, even if they buried me alongside them. Dinner that night was an exercise in suffocating normalcy. Tyler dominated conversation with stories from spring football practice, while Mom orchestrated the meal with her usual precision. Grandmother sat quietly pushing food around her plate, her gaze occasionally finding mine across the table. Each time our eyes met, I saw apology there, mixed with frustration and something that might have been fear. "Florence hasn't been eating much lately." Mom observed, her tone light but pointed as she noticed my mostly untouched plate. Another symptom of her anxiety issues. "Anxiety?" Grandmother's voice sharpened. "What anxiety issues?" "Oh, we didn't mention it in our calls. Florence has been struggling with some psychological challenges. Attention-seeking behaviors, somatic complaints, very common in young women her age." The lie fell into the space between us like a gauntlet. Grandmother's knuckles whitened as she gripped her fork, her gaze moving between my parents with dawning understanding. She'd raised Sarah new. Her tells recognized the particular brand of denial her daughter wielded like a weapon. "I see," Grandmother said slowly, "and these somatic complaints, what form do they take?" Dad cleared his throat, warning, but Grandmother ignored him. Her eyes stayed fixed on Mom, who fidgeted with her napkin under that steady regard. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Tyler shifted in his seat, clearly sensing undercurrents he didn't understand. "She thinks she has a tumor," Tyler offered, trying to diffuse tension he couldn't name. But Mom and Dad took her to Dr. Montgomery, and he said it's just stress. Dr. Montgomery examined her. Grandmother's question came sharp as a scalpel. "He didn't need to examine her," Mom replied defensively. "Robert and I provided comprehensive information about her behaviors. Harold agreed that validating delusions would be counterproductive. Harold Montgomery hasn't practiced real medicine in 15 years. He writes prescriptions for country club wives and signs whatever forms keep his lifestyle funded." Grandmother's words dripped contempt. "If my granddaughter has a growth, there is no growth." Mom's composure shattered her voice, rising to near shriek. "There is no tumor, no cancer, no disease. We are not those people, Mother. We are not victims of some genetic curse." The words hung in the air like a confession. Dad reached for Mom's hand, but she yanked away, standing so abruptly her chair scraped against hardwood. Her face had gone blotchy with emotion, years of careful control fracturing in seconds. "Sarah," Grandmother said gently, "denying family history doesn't change." "There is no family history Margaret made. Her choices lived her lifestyle. What happened to her has nothing to do with us. Margaret died of thyroid cancer that went undiagnosed for months because she couldn't afford proper screening. She was 25 years old, Sarah. Your sister was 25. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Aunt Margaret was dead, had been dead for years apparently, while my parents maintained the fiction that she was simply estranged. Phone calls that never connected, birthday cards never returned, a sister erased from existence because her death didn't fit their narrative of genetic superiority. She didn't. Mom's protests tangled together lies too twisted to maintain. She died in my arms, Grandmother continued relentlessly, begging me to make sure her niece and nephew knew the truth about our family's medical history, the thyroid conditions, the autoimmune disorders, the cancers that strike young if not caught early. I promised her, Sarah. I promised my dying daughter I'd protect her sister's children. And I promised myself I'd protect my children from that fear, Mom shot back. From growing up thinking they're doomed, checking every bump and lump, living in terror of their own bodies. So instead, you let them die of treatable conditions. The question fell like a hammer blow. Tyler had gone pale, his gaze moving between family members as his worldview restructured itself. Dad sat frozen, his careful neutrality shattered by revelations he couldn't spin or control. And Mom stood there with tears streaming down her face, her perfect makeup destroyed, looking every inch the frightened woman who'd watched her sister die and decided denial was safer than truth. Florence needs treatment, Grandmother stated firmly. Whatever it costs, whatever specialists she needs, I'll pay for it. This ends now. You will not interfere in our family. Dad found his voice authority reasserting itself. We are her parents. We make medical decisions for our dependent children. Then I'll petition for medical guardianship based on neglect. I'll hire lawyers, create public scandals, destroy the reputation you value more than your daughter's life. Don't test me, Robert. I've already buried one grandchild. I won't bury another. The threat landed with devastating effect. Dad's face went through several color changes as he calculated social damage versus filial obedience. Mom sank back into her chair, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. The careful constructs of our family dynamic lay in ruins, truth finally too heavy for delusion to support. But even as hope bloomed in my chest, I saw the glance my parents exchanged. The silent communication of partners who'd weathered storms before, who knew how to close ranks against outside threats. Grandmother was 75, lived states away, had limited resources for extended legal battles. They could wait her out, make promises they wouldn't keep, maintain their stranglehold through simple proximity. We should discuss this privately, Dad said smoothly, his corporate negotiation voice emerging. After cake, perhaps. It is your birthday after all, Eleanor. My birthday wish is for my granddaughter to see an oncologist immediately. And she will, Mom lied with recovered composure. We've already been reconsidering our approach. Haven't we, Robert? Of course. Florence's well-being is our primary concern. Always has been. The lies came so easily delivered with such conviction that even I might have believed them if not for months of evidence to the contrary. Grandmother's expression suggested she harbored no such delusions, but she allowed the fiction to stand. Perhaps she, too, needed time to strategize to figure out how to save a granddaughter from parents who preferred a dead child to an imperfect one. After dinner, I tried to corner Grandmother alone, desperate for the rest of her revelations about family history. But my parents had learned their lesson. Dad monopolized her attention with financial discussions, while Mom hustled me upstairs, insisting I looked tired and needed rest. From my bedroom window, I watched them take Grandmother for an evening walk, one on each side, like gentle jailers. Tyler knocked on my door near midnight, his face puffy from crying. My golden boy brother, the football star with the scholarship and bright future, looked lost and young in his pajamas. He sat on my bed, shoulders hunched with the weight of unwelcome knowledge. Is it true about Aunt Margaret, about genetic stuff? I don't know. Tonight's the first I've heard of it. But Tyler, this lump is real. I need you to know that to believe me. It's real and it's getting worse. He nodded slowly, processing truths that shattered 18 years of parental infallibility. Grandmother seemed really scared. I've never seen her like that before. She recognized something, maybe from Aunt Margaret, maybe from other family history they've hidden. There's so much we don't know, Tyler, so much they've kept from us. What are you going to do? The question I asked myself hourly. What could I do, trapped by financial dependence and systematic isolation? Even with grandmother's support, my parents held all the cards. They'd proven tonight that they'd rather live with comfortable lies than face difficult truths, even if those lies cost their daughter's life. I don't know, I admitted. Try to survive until I can find a way out. Tyler hugged me, then careful of my neck, his football player's strength tempered by newfound awareness of my fragility. When he left, I lay in the dark, feeling the mass pulse with my heartbeat, wondering how many more family dinners I'd survive. Grandmother would leave in 2 days, return to Richmond with her terrible knowledge and limited power to help, and I'd remain here dying by degrees while my parents perfected their performance of loving concern. The betrayal had deepened tonight, spread from simple denial to revealed deception spanning years. They'd hidden a sister's death, erased family medical history, chosen reputation over truth at every turn. The lump at my neck felt almost secondary to the cancer of lies that had metastasized through our family's foundation. Both were killing me, but only one made me wish I were already dead. The morning shift at Bradley's bookstore had always been my sanctuary. Between the gallery work and family chaos, these quiet hours among towering shelves offered peace I found nowhere else. Thomas Bradley, the owner, understood my love for the written word and had hired me sophomore year, despite my lack of retail experience. Now, 8 months later, I could barely manage the simple task of alphabetizing returns. My hands trembled as I lifted a hardcover biography from the cart, its weight seemingly tripled since last week. The book slipped from my weakened grip, landing spine first on the polished floor with a crack that echoed through the empty store. I stared at it, calculating the energy required to bend down, retrieve it, and start again. The equation felt insurmountable. Take your time, Florence. The books aren't going anywhere. Thomas emerged from behind the ancient cash register, his kind face creased with concern. At 53, he moved with the careful grace of someone who'd spent decades navigating narrow aisles and precarious book stacks. His salt and pepper beard couldn't hide the worry in his expression as he watched me struggle with tasks that had once been effortless. "I'm fine, just butterfingers today." I lied, forcing myself to reach for the fallen book. The movement sent shooting pains from my neck down my left arm, making me gasp involuntarily. Thomas retrieved the book himself, placing it gently on the cart. "Why don't you work the register this morning? I can handle the shelving." "But you hired me specifically for the physical work so you could focus on inventory and customer service." "I hired you because you treat books like treasures and customers like friends. The rest is just logistics." His kindness threatened my carefully maintained composure. Thomas had never pried into my declining health, never questioned the scarves and turtlenecks in increasingly warm weather. But he'd quietly adjusted my duties, reduced my hours while maintaining my pay, created a safety net I desperately needed but couldn't acknowledge without falling apart. I made it 90 minutes before the first wave of vertigo struck. A customer was asking about travel guides to Italy, her voice fading in and out like a badly tuned radio. I gripped the counter's edge knuckles, white with effort, trying to focus on her moving lips. The fluorescent lights seemed to pulse with my heartbeat, each throb sending lightning through my skull. Miss, are you all right?" The woman's concern pierced through the fog. I forced my eyes open. When had I closed them? To find her leaning across the counter, one hand extended as if to catch me. Behind her, Thomas had abandoned his pricing to move closer, his body language coiled to spring into action. "Just a head rush." I managed the words, thick and clumsy. "The travel section is on the second floor, left side, past the reading nook." She departed reluctantly, casting worried glances over her shoulder. Thomas waited until the door chimes settled before approaching his movements, careful as if I might spook like a wounded animal. He'd seen through my bravado from the beginning, I realized. had been watching me deteriorate for weeks with the patience of someone who understood suffering. "Florence, when's the last time you ate something substantial?" The question required thought I couldn't spare. Yesterday, the day before food had become an enemy, my throat too swollen to swallow comfortably, my stomach rebelling against anything more complex than water and crackers. The energy required to eat felt better spent on simply surviving each day. This morning, I lied reflexively. "Big breakfast." Try again. And this time, remember that I've known you for almost 3 years. You're a terrible liar when you're healthy, and whatever's happening now has only made you worse at it. Tears pricked my eyes at his gentle honesty. Here was another person willing to see my truth, to acknowledge what my parents denied with such vehemence. But acknowledging meant explaining, and explaining meant revealing the depth of my family's betrayal. The words tangled in my throat, trapped behind the mask that grew larger each day. Thomas, I can't talk about it, please." He nodded slowly, decision crystallizing in his weathered features. "All right. But you're taking a break. There's soup in my office fridge. Annie made too much, again insisted I bring leftovers. You're going to eat at least half a bowl while I handle the floor. The afternoon rush. We'll survive without you for 30 minutes. Go. That's an order from your tyrannical boss." His wife Annie's soup was homemade chicken noodle still warm in its container. I managed 3 spoonfuls before my body rebelled, sending me racing for the employee bathroom. When I emerged shaky and humiliated, Thomas stood outside with a bottle of water and a dampened paper towel. "That's it. I'm calling someone to pick you up." "No." The word came out sharper than intended, panic flooding my system. If he called my parents, if they discovered I'd been struggling at work, they'd use it as evidence of my supposed mental breakdown. "Please, Thomas, I just need a few minutes. I can finish my shift." "Florence, you can barely stand upright. Whatever's going on, pushing yourself like this isn't helping." "You don't understand. If I leave early, if anyone finds out I'm struggling, I'll lose everything. My job, my apartment, my education, everything depends on maintaining the illusion that I'm fine." He studied me with eyes that had seen too much of the world's cruelty. Thomas had bought the bookstore after a career in social work, burning out on a system that failed the vulnerable. He recognized desperation, knew the look of someone trapped by circumstances beyond their control. "All right," he said finally, "but we're doing this my way. You're going to sit behind the counter on the stool. No lifting, no climbing, no exertion beyond ringing up purchases. If you feel faint again, you tell me immediately. Deal." I nodded gratefully, following him back to the register on unsteady legs. The next hour passed in a blur of transactions and forced smiles. Regular customers commented on my appearance. "You look tired, dear," and "Are you feeling all right?" Each observation another crack in my failing facade. Then Mrs. Patterson arrived with her weekly romance novel selection, chattering about her grandchildren as I scanned her books. The scanner felt impossibly heavy in my hand, the simple motion of passing it over barcodes requiring tremendous concentration. Black spots danced at the edges of my vision, multiplying with each breath. "Florence." Mrs. Patterson's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Honey, you're swaying." I tried to respond, to reassure her that everything was fine, but my tongue felt thick, uncooperative, and the black spots were joining together into a creeping darkness that consumed my peripheral vision. The last thing I heard was Thomas shouting my name before the world tilted sideways and disappeared entirely. Consciousness returned in stages, the smell of old paper and coffee, the feel of cool concrete beneath my cheek, voices raised in urgent discussion. I lay still, taking inventory of my body while keeping my eyes closed. The pain in my neck had spread down my spine, a line of fire that made even breathing an ordeal. "Ambulance is 3 minutes out." Thomas's voice tight with worry. "Should we move her, Mrs. Patterson?" near tears. "No, keep her still. Florence, can you hear me?" I opened my eyes to find Thomas kneeling beside me, his face upside down from my position on the floor. Behind him, Mrs. Patterson clutched her romance novels like prayer books, her expression stricken. Other customers had formed a loose circle, their faces mixtures of concern and morbid curiosity. "Don't," I whispered, panic giving me strength to push up on one elbow. "Please, Thomas, cancel the ambulance. I can't go to the hospital." "You collapsed, Florence. You need medical attention." "I can't. They'll call my parents. I can't. Please." But it was too late. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with each second. Soon EMTs would arrive, would see the mass distorting my neck, would ask questions I couldn't answer without revealing months of deliberate neglect. The hospital would want insurance information, emergency contacts would insist on notifying my parents as their barely adult daughter arrived unconscious and obviously ill. Thomas gripped my hand as the sirens reached deafening levels. "Whatever's been happening, it ends here. You're going to get help whether your parents approve or not." The bookstore's door chimes sang their gentle song as EMTs rushed in with equipment and professional efficiency. They surrounded me with skilled hands and careful questions, their faces carefully neutral as they cataloged vital signs that told a story of systemic failure. One of them, a young woman with kind brown eyes, carefully moved my collar to place monitoring equipment and couldn't suppress her intake of breath. "How long have you had this mass, honey?" "2 months. I admitted, too exhausted for lies. "Maybe longer." "And you're being treated by—" "No one. My parents won't let me see a doctor. They think I'm making it up." The EMTs exchanged glances over my head, professional communication that spoke volumes. The woman squeezed my shoulder gently as they prepared to move me onto a gurney. "Well, you're going to see lots of doctors now. We're taking you to St. Mary's and they're going to take excellent care of you." As they wheeled me through the bookstore, past shelves that had been my refuge, and customers who'd shown more concern than my own family, I caught sight of Thomas. He stood by his register phone already in hand, jaw set with determination. He'd call my parents, I knew, but not to enable their delusions. Thomas Bradley had spent a career protecting the vulnerable, and today that included me. The ambulance doors closed on my old life, the one where I pretended everything was fine, where I hid my symptoms and enabled my parents' denial. Whatever came next, whether treatment or confrontation or the complete destruction of my family's carefully constructed image, it started with this unwilling journey toward truth. The sirens wailed as we raced through familiar streets, each turn taking me closer to a reckoning 2 months in the making. The mass at my neck throbbed with my racing heartbeat, no longer hidden, no longer denied. For better or worse, my collapse at Bradley's bookstore had brought everything into the light. The emergency room at St. Mary's Hospital buzzed with controlled chaos, but my cubicle felt like an island of terrible stillness. I'd been here 2 hours, poked and prodded by a succession of increasingly concerned medical professionals. The initial EMT report had triggered a cascade of tests, each result adding urgency to my case. Now I waited for Dr. Walsh, the emergency attending physician, to return with the MRI results. The machine had been a nightmare of claustrophobia and noise, 45 minutes of lying perfectly still, while magnetic fields mapped the invader in my neck. The technician had maintained professional composure, but I'd caught her expression when she thought I wasn't looking. The same recognition I'd seen in every medical professional who'd examined me today. Whatever they saw, it wasn't good. Florence. I'm Maria Santos from Patient Services. A woman entered carrying a clipboard and wearing the carefully neutral expression of someone trained to deliver difficult news. I understand you're here alone. We should discuss your insurance situation and contact your emergency contacts. My parents have been called. They're on their way. Maria settled into the visitor's chair, her movements practiced and soothing. I see you're listed on your parents' insurance, but there are some flags in the system about coverage limitations. Can you tell me about that? The whole sordid story spilled out. The burned referral, the family meeting, the systematic blocking of medical care. Maria's expression never changed, but her note-taking became increasingly rapid. When I finished, she set down her pen with careful deliberation. "Florence, what your parents have done may constitute medical neglect. You're 20 years old, legally an adult. There are options available to ensure you receive necessary treatment regardless of their consent." "But they pay for everything, school, housing, food." "Your life is worth more than tuition. We have emergency funds, charity care programs, legal advocates who specialize in cases like yours. But first, let's see what Dr. Walsh has found." As if summoned by her words, Dr. Walsh appeared in the doorway. Mid-40s with prematurely gray hair, he carried himself with the gravity of someone about to deliver life-altering news. The large envelope in his hands contained films that would either validate months of suffering or confirm my parents' accusations of attention-seeking. "Florence, I've reviewed your MRI results with our radiologist and oncology team." He pulled the films from their envelope, holding them up to the fluorescent light. "This mass at the base of your neck is approximately 6 centimeters in diameter. It's pressing against your trachea, which explains your breathing difficulties, and has begun to infiltrate surrounding tissue structures." The image looked alien, a white starburst of wrongness where smooth tissue should be. 6 centimeters, larger than a golf ball, smaller than a tennis ball, but devastating in its implications. Dr. Walsh traced the edges with his pen, indicating tendrils that reached like grasping fingers toward vital structures. "Based on the imaging and your blood work, we're looking at what appears to be an aggressive thyroid malignancy. The good news is that it's still operable, though barely. Another few weeks of growth and we'd be having a very different conversation." Cancer. The word felt strange in my mouth, simultaneously validating and terrifying. "It's actually cancer." "I'm afraid so. We'll need to do a biopsy for specific typing, but given the imaging characteristics and your symptoms, I'm confident in this preliminary diagnosis. The question now is how quickly we can get you into surgery." Maria leaned forward. "Dr. Florence's parents have been preventing her from seeking treatment. They've blocked her insurance coverage for specialists and convinced her primary physician she's having psychological problems." Dr. Walsh's professional mask slipped, revealing genuine anger. This young woman has a visible tumor that any first-year medical student could identify. How could any parent—" He stopped himself, professionalism reasserting. "I apologize. Let's focus on moving forward." "My parents will be here soon," I said quietly. "They'll try to remove me, claim I'm being dramatic, that you're overreacting." "They can try," Dr. Walsh said firmly, "but you're admitted under my care now and I won't release you without treatment. Maria, can you please have security on standby and contact our legal team about emergency medical custody if needed?" The preparation proved prescient. 20 minutes later, my parents burst through the emergency room doors like avenging angels of denial. Mom's perfect composure had cracked makeup smeared from angry tears. Dad's face bore the purple flush of rage his executive presence wielded like a weapon against anyone in his path. "Where is our daughter?" Dad demanded of the first nurse he encountered. "Florence Mitchell. We're taking her home immediately." I heard their voices before I saw them, that familiar combination of authority and barely controlled hysteria. Maria squeezed my shoulder reassuringly before stepping out to intercept them. Through the thin curtain, I could hear the collision of irresistible force meeting immovable object. "Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, I'm Maria Santos from Patient Services. Your daughter is receiving critical care." "Our daughter is a hypochondriac who's wasting valuable hospital resources," Mom interrupted. "We have documentation from our family physician about her attention-seeking behaviors." "Ma'am, your daughter has a 6-centimeter mass at the base of her neck that's threatening her airway. She requires immediate oncological intervention." Silence fell like a dropped stone. For 3 heartbeats, the only sounds were distant monitor beeps and rolling gurneys. Then Dad's voice, lower, but more dangerous. "You're mistaken. Our daughter has anxiety. Dr. Montgomery confirmed. Would you like to see the MRI results?" Dr. Walsh had joined the conversation, his tone brooking no argument. because I'd be happy to show you exactly what 2 months of denied treatment have allowed to grow in your daughter's neck. The curtain pulled back to reveal my parents flanked by medical professionals. Mom's face had gone pale beneath her smeared mascara, her hands clutching her purse like a lifeline. Dad maintained his aggressive posture, but uncertainty flickered in his eyes. Behind them, a security guard stood at discreet attention. Florence. Mom breathed, taking in my hospital gown, the IV line, the monitors recording vital signs that told their own truth. "What have you done?" "She's gotten help," Dr. Walsh answered for me. He clipped the MRI films to the light box mounted on my cubicle wall, illuminating my disease for all to see. "This is your daughter's thyroid mass. These white areas indicate tissue invasion. This narrowing here is where it's compressing her trachea. Without treatment, she had perhaps 6 to 8 weeks before complete airway obstruction." My parents stared at the films as if they could will them to change, to transform into the psychological manifestation they'd insisted upon. Dad recovered first, his business instincts seeking angles and exits from this unwelcome reality. "There must be some mistake. Our family physician is either incompetent or complicit in medical neglect," Dr. Walsh interrupted. "This mass is visible to the naked eye. It's palpable through basic examination. No competent physician could miss this, which means he chose not to look." Mom sank into the visitor's chair Maria had vacated, her carefully constructed world crumbling. She reached toward my neck with trembling fingers, stopping just short of contact. For the first time in 2 months, she truly saw what she desperately avoided. The visible distortion, the angry swelling, the thing that made her daughter imperfect and therefore impossible. "Just like Margaret," she whispered the words barely audible. "Oh God, it's exactly like Margaret." Margaret. Dr. Walsh's attention sharpened. "Family history of thyroid cancer." My sister, Mom, admitted, tears flowing freely now. "She died at 25, the same type of mass, the same location. We couldn't afford... She didn't have insurance by the time anyone took it seriously." "And you thought denying your daughter's symptoms would somehow prevent history from repeating." Dr. Walsh's disgust was barely concealed. "Genetic predisposition doesn't care about your denial, Mrs. Mitchell. It only cares about early detection and treatment." Dad had moved to the light box, studying the films with the intensity he usually reserved for quarterly reports. His finger traced the tumor's outline, following those reaching tendrils with growing horror. When he turned back, his face had aged a decade in minutes. "How soon can she have surgery?" The question marked a fundamental shift. Not whether, but when. Not denial, but acceptance forced by irrefutable evidence. Dr. Walsh relaxed marginally, recognizing the pivot from adversary to ally. "We're scheduling her for Thursday with Dr. Patricia Kumar, our head of oncological surgery. 3 days to stabilize her levels and ensure she's strong enough for the procedure. It'll be extensive. The mass has infiltrated significantly. We may need to remove substantial tissue, possibly requiring reconstruction." "Whatever it takes," Dad said quietly. "Whatever she needs." "We'll pay for everything," Mom added, her voice hollow with shock. "The best rooms, the best surgeons, whatever insurance won't cover." "Actually," Maria interjected smoothly, "Florence may qualify for independent coverage given the documented medical neglect. We'll need to explore all options to ensure continuity of care." The implications hung heavy. Potential legal ramifications, social services involvement, the complete dismantling of their carefully maintained facade. I watched my parents absorb this new reality, saw them finally understand that their denial had nearly killed their daughter. Can we have a moment alone with Florence?" Mom asked, her usual commanding tone replaced by something small and broken. Dr. Walsh glanced at me for permission. I nodded slowly, though exhaustion made even that simple movement difficult. The medical team filed out Maria, touching my hand in silent support. Security remained visible through the doorway, a reminder that my parents' power had limits within these walls. Mom approached cautiously as if I might shatter at contact. Her fingers ghosted over the mass she'd denied for months, finally acknowledging its undeniable presence. Dad stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder, both of them looking lost in this new landscape where their daughter had cancer, and they were the villains in her story. "We were so afraid," Mom whispered. After watching her die slowly while we stood helpless, we couldn't face it happening again. So you decided to let it happen faster." The words came out harsher than intended, months of suppressed anger finding voice. Dad flinched as if slapped. "We thought, if we didn't acknowledge it, if we refused to let it be real..." "Cancer doesn't care about your acknowledgement. It grows regardless. Every day you denied it, every doctor's appointment you blocked, every time you called me attention-seeking. The tumor just got bigger, stronger, harder to remove." "We know," Mom sobbed. "We know, baby. We're so sorry. We'll do better. Be better. Whatever you need. I need surgery. I need treatment. I need parents who believe me when I say something's wrong with my body." They nodded in unison, broken dolls, accepting whatever terms might buy forgiveness. But trust once shattered doesn't rebuild with simple apologies. They'd chosen their reputation over my life, their comfort over my health. The mass in my neck would be removed, but the scars of their betrayal would last far longer than any surgical incision. "Thursday," I said finally. "We focus on Thursday. Everything else we'll deal with after I survive this." If I survived this. The unspoken possibility lingered as my parents retreated to the waiting room, their empire of denial reduced to rubble by black and white films that showed death growing in increments. The MRI had revealed more than cancer. It had exposed the malignancy of their love, conditional and image-obsessed, willing to sacrifice truth for the comfort of lies. Dr. Walsh returned to discuss pre-operative procedures, his professional kindness a balm after the emotional bloodletting. As he spoke of biopsies and staging of survival rates and treatment protocols, I touched the mass that had saved me through its very existence. Without its undeniable growth, I might have believed their gaslighting might have accepted that my pain was psychological rather than physical. The tumor had forced truth into light, dragged secrets from shadows, made denial impossible, even for masters of self-deception. In trying to kill me, it had paradoxically set me free. The hospital room felt different at night, transformed from clinical efficiency to something more intimate and vulnerable. Maria Santos had pulled strings to keep me in a private room for observation, away from the emergency department's chaos. The official reason involved monitoring my compromised airway, but I suspected she wanted to create a safe space away from my parents' influence. Tyler arrived at 8:30, still in his football practice gear, grass stains on his knees and worry etched across his young face. He'd driven himself, defying our parents' instructions to wait until they could properly explain the situation. One look at me truly looked without their filter of denial, and his composure cracked. "Jesus, Floor, it's huge. How did they not see this?" He approached slowly, as if I might break from sudden movement. The brothers who'd once wrestled in the backyard now faced each other across a chasm of medical neglect and family lies. I could see him processing the visible evidence, reconciling the sister he thought he knew with the patient before him. "They saw it," I said quietly. "They just chose not to believe it." Tyler sank into the bedside chair, his athletic frame folding in on itself. Somewhere between the family meeting and this moment, my little brother had begun his journey toward uncomfortable adulthood. The kind that comes from discovering your protectors can be your greatest threats. "I found something," he said after a long silence. "After grandmother's visit, after what she said about Aunt Margaret, I went looking." My heart rate monitor betrayed my sudden interest, beeping faster as Tyler pulled out his phone. He'd photographed pages from what looked like old documents, the images slightly blurry but readable. Medical records, death certificates, correspondence, and faded ink. "Mom keeps a box in the attic," Behind the Christmas decorations, inside another box, labeled Tax Returns 1995. I don't think Dad even knows it exists. He scrolled through images with shaking fingers. Aunt Margaret died on May 15th, 20 years ago. Papillary thyroid carcinoma with lymphatic involvement. Says here it was treatable if caught early. The words on the screen blurred as tears filled my eyes. My aunt, my namesake in stubbornness, if not in name, had died of exactly what grew in my neck. Treatable if caught early. A refrain that would haunt my parents if they had any conscience left. "There's more?" Tyler continued, his voice thick with emotion. "Grandmother's sister, Elizabeth, died at 32. Same thing. Great Aunt Rose on Mom's side, 28. There's a genetic counselor's report from 15 years ago recommending annual screenings for all family members starting at age 18. 15 years ago, when you were 3 and I was 5. They knew Fleur. They've known our entire lives that we were at risk, and they did nothing. Worse than nothing, they actively hid it." A knock interrupted our devastating archaeology. Maria entered with a young man in scrubs who introduced himself as Dr. Benjamin Park, the overnight hospitalist. He looked barely older than Tyler, but his eyes held the weight of someone who'd already seen too much preventable tragedy. "I've been reviewing your case," Dr. Park said, settling at the foot of my bed. "Maria filled me in on the family dynamics. I'd like to keep you for observation tonight, given your airway compromise and the emotional stress of today's revelations. My parents have no say in your medical care. You're 20 years old, legally competent, and in a safe environment. They can visit during normal hours if you choose to allow it, but they cannot remove you against medical advice." The relief nearly undid me. For months I'd been trapped in their web of denial, isolated from help by financial dependence and systematic gaslighting. Here, finally, were professionals who saw through the facade, who prioritized my health over their comfort. "There's something else," Maria added gently. "The social worker on call would like to speak with you about your home situation. Given the documented medical neglect and your financial dependence, there may be resources available to help you maintain independence during treatment." "You mean not going back home?" "That would be your choice. But we want you to know you have options beyond returning to an environment that endangered your life." Tyler's hand found mine, squeezing with protective ferocity. My baby brother, the golden child who'd never questioned our parents' perfection, was recalculating his entire world view in real time. I could see him weighing loyalties, choosing sides in a war he'd never asked to join. "I'll help," he said firmly. "Whatever you need, Fleur. Money, transportation, a place to stay. I've got scholarship money coming in and I can take out loans." "Tyler, no. You can't jeopardize your future for me. You think I could play football knowing my sister is dying because our parents cared more about their reputation than her life?" His voice cracked on the last word. "I've been their perfect son while they let you suffer. That ends now." Dr. Park cleared his throat diplomatically. "While family support is valuable, let's focus on immediate medical needs. Florence, we've scheduled your biopsy for tomorrow morning. Dr. Kumar wants cellular confirmation before Thursday's surgery, though the imaging is fairly conclusive. We discussed procedures and possibilities, the cold medical terminology somehow comforting after months of emotional manipulation. Cancer had stages, grades, treatment protocols, concrete realities that couldn't be denied or twisted to fit convenient narratives. As Dr. Park left, Tyler's phone buzzed with messages. Our parents demanding his return, threatening consequences for his betrayal. He turned the phone face down without responding, his jaw set with determination I'd rarely seen outside the football field. "Show me more," I requested, gesturing to his photographed evidence. The box's contents revealed a family history our parents had desperately tried to bury. Medical records spanning generations, all showing the same pattern. Thyroid masses appearing in young women, treatable when caught early, fatal when ignored. Margaret's records were the most detailed, including increasingly desperate letters to various clinics begging for payment plans, charity care, anything to save her life. "This one got to me," Tyler said, showing me a handwritten note in Margaret's distinctive scrawl. It's dated 2 weeks before she died. "Sarah, I know you're scared for your future children, but promise me you won't hide from this. Promise me you'll tell them the truth, get them tested, give them the chance I didn't have. Love them enough to face the fear. All my love, Maggie." "She broke her promise," I whispered. Mom read this, held her dying sister's last wish, and decided comfortable lies were easier than uncomfortable truths. "There's one more thing," Tyler said reluctantly. "I wasn't sure if I should show you, but you deserve to know everything." The final image showed a birth certificate. Margaret Ann Mitchell, born 3 years before Mom died at 25. But it was the attached note that stole my breath. A genetic test result showing Margaret had been adopted. No blood relation to our mother, no shared genetic risk. "She wasn't even genetically related," Tyler said unnecessarily. "Mom let her adoptive sister die of a hereditary disease that couldn't have been hereditary for her, and then used her death to justify hiding the real family history from us." The betrayal deepened with each revelation, layers of deception, peeling back to reveal a rotten core. Our parents hadn't just denied my illness, they'd built entire false narratives, created fictional genetic connections, used a beloved sister's death as an excuse for cowardice. "I can't go back there," I said with sudden clarity. "Even after surgery, even if they apologize and promise to change, I can't live with people who would rather see me dead than imperfect." Tyler nodded, already thinking ahead with the strategic mind that made him a star quarterback. "Jessica would let you stay with her. Or there's my friend Marcus. His family has that garage apartment they've been wanting to rent. We'll figure it out, Flor. You're not alone anymore." Maria returned with forms about medical power of attorney, emergency contacts, insurance alternatives. As I filled them out, naming Tyler and grandmother Eleanor instead of my parents, I felt something shift. The mass in my neck remained. Cancer still grew with each passing hour, but I was no longer trapped by their denial. "Your parents are in the waiting room," Maria mentioned carefully. "They've asked to see you several times. Security is keeping them there, but I wanted you to know." "Let them wait," Tyler said fiercely. "Let them sit there all night thinking about what they've done." But I was already beyond anger, floating in that strange space between diagnosis and treatment, where everything feels simultaneously urgent and suspended. My parents had made their choices prioritize their fears over my life. Now I would make mine, choosing survival over family harmony, truth over comfortable lies. "Tell them visiting hours start at 9 tomorrow," I decided. "If they want to see me, they can wait like everyone else." Maria smiled approvingly and left to deliver the message. Tyler settled in for the night, ignoring our parents' increasingly frantic texts. We talked quietly about everything and nothing. His football season, my photography, the future that suddenly seemed both more precious and more precarious. The truth had unraveled completely now, 2 decades of deception exposed by one stubborn tumor. In trying to protect us from genetic destiny, our parents had nearly ensured its fulfillment. The irony might have been amusing if it weren't so nearly fatal. As midnight approached and Tyler dozed in the uncomfortable chair, I touched the mass that had changed everything. Thursday's surgery loomed with all its risks and uncertainties, but for the first time in months, I faced it with truth as my companion rather than denial as my enemy. The cancer might kill me still. Dr. Kumar had been honest about the tumor's aggressive nature and advanced stage, but if I died, it would be while fighting, while treating the disease my parents pretended didn't exist. That was its own kind of victory, small and bitter, but mine to claim. Morning arrived with a parade of professionals who actually believed in my illness. The biopsy had confirmed papillary thyroid carcinoma, with aggressive features validating months of dismissed symptoms. As I processed this official diagnosis, unexpected visitors began arriving. people who'd witnessed my decline and refused to stay silent any longer. Diana Chen from Morrison Gallery appeared first carrying a leather portfolio and wearing the determined expression that had built her artistic empire. She navigated the hospital corridors with the same precision she used to curate exhibitions, finding my room despite the maze of identical hallways. "Florence, darling, I've been worried sick since you missed your shift yesterday." She settled into the visitor's chair with practiced grace, her sharp eyes cataloging medical equipment with growing concern. "When I called the bookstore, Thomas told me what happened." "I'm sorry about missing work." "Don't you dare apologize. What I want to know is why you've been suffering in silence when people who care about you could have helped." The story tumbled out again, each retelling making it more real. Diana listened with increasing outrage, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the portfolio in agitation. When I finished, she opened the leather case with deliberate precision. "I started documenting your decline 6 weeks ago," she said, spreading photographs across my hospital blanket. "At first, I thought you were stressed about the exhibition, but as an artist, I notice bodies, how they move, how they occupy space, how they change." The photographs told my story more eloquently than words ever could. The first showed me hanging a piece in early January, stretching easily to reach high corners. By February, I was using a ladder for tasks that once required only raised arms. March showed me bracing against walls. April captured my trembling hands, struggling with simple equipment. "This one made me start the documentation project," Diana said, indicating a photo from 5 weeks ago. "You didn't know I was watching, but look at your posture." In the image, I stood in profile, adjusting lighting unconsciously, protecting my neck with one raised shoulder. The defensive position of someone in constant pain, trying to shield an injury from further harm. Even in black and white, the swelling was visible as an unnatural shadow at my neck's base. These are time-stamped Florence, metadata intact. They show progressive physical deterioration over 2 months. If you need evidence for any legal proceedings. The possibility hadn't occurred to me, too focused on immediate survival to consider consequences. Medical neglect, especially with documented proof, carries serious ramifications, but we'll discuss that later. Right now, I have a more pressing question. How are you paying for treatment? My parents said they'd cover everything, but you can't trust people who denied you care for months." Diana pulled out her phone with businesslike efficiency. "I've already spoken with the gallery's board. We have an emergency artist fund for situations exactly like this. It's yours if you need it." Before I could protest, Thomas Bradley arrived carrying a worn leather satchel and the faint smell of old books that followed him everywhere. He paused in the doorway, taking in Diana's presence, with the careful evaluation of someone accustomed to reading situations like stories. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said, though his tone suggested he'd interrupt anything to check on me. "I brought some things." He produced paperback novels from his satchel. Comfort reads he'd noticed me gravitating toward during quiet shifts. Beneath them lay an envelope that he placed on my bedside table without comment, though its thickness suggested more than a get-well card. "The bookstore community takes care of its own," he said simply. "Several regular customers asked after you. Mrs. Patterson alone insisted on contributing when she heard about your situation." "Thomas, I can't." "You can and you will. Do you know how many times you've helped elderly customers to their cars with heavy bags? How many children you've helped find the perfect book? How many lonely people found a kind word and genuine smile during your shifts?" His voice roughened with emotion. "That kindness is coming back to you now. Don't refuse it." Diana and Thomas exchanged looks of mutual recognition, two people who'd independently decided to act as the family I should have had. Their quiet coordination suggested phone calls I hadn't known about, plans made, while I lay unconscious in the emergency room. "There's more," Diana said carefully. "Your photography professor reached out to me yesterday. Dr. Hayes." My stomach clenched. The exhibition, my senior showcase, my entire academic career, all threatened by cancer and its treatment. How could I maintain my scholarship while undergoing surgery and chemotherapy? How could I graduate when I could barely stand? She's been documenting too, Diana continued, not just photographs, but your academic performance correlation with your physical decline. She wants to speak with you about medical leave options that won't affect your graduation timeline. She noticed. Florence, everyone who cares about you noticed. We've all been watching you fade away, wanting to help, but not knowing how to break through your walls. Thomas's quiet words carried gentle reproach. We suspected family troubles, but none of us imagined this level of neglect. A knock interrupted our impromptu support group. Dr. Patricia Kumar entered with the focused energy of someone who dismantled tumors with the same precision she organized her days. The head of oncological surgery commanded attention, despite her small stature, silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun. Florence, good to see you awake and alert. I've reviewed your biopsy results and imaging. She nodded politely to Diana and Thomas. Family. Better than family, I said firmly. They can stay. Dr. Kumar's expression softened marginally. Very well. Thursday's surgery will be extensive. The tumor has infiltrated beyond the thyroid into surrounding structures. We'll need to remove the thyroid entirely, several lymph nodes, and possibly portion of the affected muscle tissue. But you can get it all. I believe so, though I won't know definitively until I'm operating. The good news is your age and general health work in your favor. Recovery will be challenging, but your prognosis is ultimately positive if we achieve clean margins. Diana was already taking notes, her gallery management skills translating seamlessly to medical advocacy. What about reconstruction cosmetic considerations? We'll minimize scarring where possible, but functionality takes precedence. There will be a visible incision and possible voice changes depending on nerve involvement. I don't care about scars, I said quickly. Just get it out, all of it. Dr. Kumar smiled, the expression transforming her serious face. That's exactly the attitude I like to see. Now let's discuss pre-operative protocols. As she outlined the surgical plan, more allies arrived. Jessica burst through the door, still in her clinical rotation scrubs, having abandoned her nursing placement the moment she heard. Dr. Hayes followed shortly after, carrying a folder thick with documentation and wearing the fierce expression of an educator protecting her student. I've been in touch with the dean, Dr. Hayes announced without preamble. Medical leave with full accommodation is already approved. Your scholarship is safe. Your graduation timeline flexible. Focus on healing. Your education will be waiting when you're ready. The room filled with people who'd chosen to show up to fight for me when my own parents wouldn't. Each brought their own form of support. Financial, emotional, practical. Thomas had arranged coverage for my bookstore shifts indefinitely. Diana had already rescheduled my gallery commitments. Jessica offered her apartment as recovery space away from my parents' toxic environment. We've also started something else, Diana said, pulling up her phone. With your permission, of course. But people want to help Florence. The GoFundMe page showed a professional photograph. One of Diana's artistic documentations of my decline transformed into a rallying cry. The story, written with Thomas's literary skill, laid out facts without melodrama. In 6 hours, it had raised $8,000. The bookstore customers, gallery patrons, your classmates. Word spreads in a small city. Your parents may have failed you, but your community hasn't. Tears came then, unstoppable and cleansing. For months I'd carried this burden alone, convinced that seeking help meant admitting weakness. But these people saw strength in survival courage, in continuing to show up, even as my body betrayed me. They'd watched me fade and chosen to illuminate what my parents tried to keep in shadow. There's one more thing, Dr. Hayes said quietly. I've documented everything, Florence. Every missed class, every extension request, every time you nearly fainted during critiques but insisted on finishing your presentation. If you choose to pursue legal action for medical neglect, I'll testify. We all will, Thomas added firmly. What your parents did, what they didn't do, is criminal. You nearly died because they valued their comfort over your life. The weight of their collective support felt heavier than any tumor. Here were adults who'd acted as parents should, observing symptoms, expressing concern, offering help without conditions. They'd created a safety net while my actual parents cut every rope that might have saved me. "I don't know how to thank you all," I managed through tears. "You live," Diana said simply. "You have the surgery, you fight this cancer, and you live. That's all the thanks any of us need." Dr. Kumar had watched our interaction with interest, accustomed to family dynamics, but perhaps not to chosen families forming in hospital rooms. She made additional notes, her expression thoughtful. "You'll need someone to sign as medical power of attorney for the surgery, someone you trust to make decisions if complications arise." "Tyler," I said without hesitation. "My brother, he turned 18 last month. And after surgery, you'll need consistent care during recovery, someone to monitor for complications, help with medications." "She'll stay with me," Jessica said firmly. "I'm in my final year of nursing school. I can handle post-operative care." "I'll arrange transportation to all follow-up appointments," Thomas offered. "Meal delivery is already being coordinated through the gallery," Diana added. "Several of our featured artists are excellent cooks who want to contribute." Dr. Kumar nodded approvingly. "It seems you have better support than most patients with involved families. I'll have the social worker bring the necessary paperwork." As afternoon wore on, my room became command central for the small army organizing around my care. Phone calls were made, schedules, coordinated contingency plans developed. When Maria returned with legal documents, she found a functioning team ready to ensure I'd never face medical decisions alone again. "Your parents have been asking for updates," she mentioned carefully. "They're still in the waiting room." "Let them wait," Diana said with aristocratic dismissal. "They had 2 months to act. They can experience a few hours of uncertainty." But I was already moving past anger towards something more complex. My parents had failed me, catastrophically chosen comfort over truth, reputation over their daughter's life. But watching my chosen family mobilize, seeing how community could fill the spaces where biology failed, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: hope. The surgery loomed in 36 hours, carrying all the risks Dr. Kumar had honestly outlined. The cancer might have spread too far, the extraction might damage too much recovery, might bring complications nobody anticipated. But I wouldn't face any of it alone. These people who owed me nothing had chosen to show up to stand between me and the abyss my parents' denial had created. As evening approached and visiting hours ended, my allies departed with promises to return. Thomas left his envelope, $500 in cash, for whatever insurance doesn't cover. Diana's portfolio remained evidence of my decline, but also proof that someone had been watching, caring, documenting the truth my parents denied. Jessica stayed longest, helping me navigate the complex emotions of finding family among strangers while being betrayed by blood. We talked about recovery plans, about the apartment she'd already begun preparing, about a future that suddenly seemed possible again. "You know what's funny?" I said as she gathered her things. "The tumor saved my life. Not medically. It's trying to kill me. But without it, I might never have learned who actually cares about me." Silver linings to cancer. Jessica managed a watery smile. "That's definitely going in my nursing school essay about patient resilience." After she left, I sat in the gathering darkness, thinking about families, the ones we're born into and the ones we build. My parents remained in the waiting room, probably crafting new narratives to explain their daughter's rebellion. But their version of events no longer mattered. The truth had found its allies, and together we'd fight what they'd pretended didn't exist. Thursday couldn't come soon enough. Wednesday morning arrived with paperwork instead of poetry. Maria Santos entered my room at 7 sharp, armed with folders that would determine whether I'd receive treatment as a charity case or a covered patient. The battlefield had shifted from family dynamics to insurance bureaucracy, but the stakes remained life and death. "Florence, we need to discuss your options moving forward." Maria arranged documents across my bedside table with practiced efficiency. Your parents' insurance technically covers the surgery, but there are complications. Of course there are. 2 days of relative peace had restored some equilibrium, but mention of insurance brought fresh anxiety. They've listed you as having pre-existing psychological conditions that led to unnecessary medical procedures. Dr. Montgomery filed reports suggesting hypochondria and attention-seeking behavior. The insurance company is questioning whether the surgery is medically necessary. The betrayal deepened with each revelation. Not content with denying my illness, my parents had created a paper trail designed to prevent future treatment. Dr. Montgomery, their longtime friend and golf companion, had participated in medical fraud to protect their delusions. But the MRI shows clear malignancy. Yes, we're fighting their classification, but it takes time. In the meantime, we need to explore alternative coverage options. She produced applications for emergency Medicaid, hospital, charity care, and independent insurance through the healthcare marketplace. Each form required detailed financial information. I didn't have employment history complicated by my parents' control and documentation of the neglect that led to this moment. I don't even know my social security number, I admitted. My parents handled everything. Taxes, insurance cards, even my bank account is joint with theirs. Maria's expression darkened. Financial abuse often accompanies medical neglect. We see parents maintaining control through deliberate dependency. She made notes in margins, her handwriting sharp with disapproval. We'll need to untangle your finances completely. Do you have any independent income? My job's at the gallery and bookstore, but the checks go into the joint account. I have a debit card, but they monitor all transactions. We'll start with opening your own account today. Tyler can help since you'll need someone to handle banking while you're hospitalized. Maria pulled out additional forms. There's something else. The hospital's legal team has reviewed your case. They believe you have grounds for an emergency petition regarding medical decision-making. You mean removing my parents' authority? Essentially, yes. Given documented medical neglect and their attempt to interfere with necessary treatment, a judge could grant you full medical autonomy with Tyler as backup decision-maker despite his age. The door burst open before I could process this information. My parents entered like they owned the building, Dad in his power suit, and Mom clutching designer handbag like armor. They'd spent the night crafting new strategies, their faces showing determination rather than yesterday's shock. We need to speak with our daughter privately, Dad announced, dismissing Maria with the tone he used for subordinates. I'm discussing Florence's care options. She's asked me to stay, Maria replied calmly. Her care is our responsibility. We're her parents, her insurance holders, her financial providers, her potential killers. Tyler interrupted from the doorway. He'd arrived early, skipping morning practice to support me. Or did you forget the 2 months you pretended she was lying? Tyler, this doesn't concern you, Mom said sharply. Your sister's medical decisions are hers to make. She's 20 years old. Legally, you have no say unless she grants it. Tyler moved to stand beside my bed, a united front against parental authority. Dad's face purpled with rage. We're paying for everything. Her education, her housing, her entire life depends on our support. Support you're now using as blackmail, Maria observed. Mr. Mitchell's threats of financial retaliation for seeking medical care constitute abuse. I'm required to document such statements. It's not a threat, it's reality, Dad shot back. We have every right to determine how our money is spent. If Florence chooses to pursue unnecessary procedures, unnecessary, Tyler exploded. There's a tumor the size of a tennis ball in her neck. How is removing cancer unnecessary? Because it's not cancer. Mom's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. It's a benign growth, a cyst, something that would resolve naturally if she'd stop fixating on it. Mrs. Mitchell, Maria said carefully, have you reviewed the biopsy results? The pathology report confirming malignancy. Doctors make mistakes. Labs mix up results. This entire situation has been blown out of proportion by people who don't understand our family dynamics. The denial ran so deep, even confirmed cancer couldn't penetrate it. They'd spent the night constructing new fantasies rather than accepting truth. I watched them rewrite reality in real time, creating a narrative where they remained blameless parents, victimized by a dramatic daughter and predatory medical system. "Get out," I said quietly. Everyone turned to stare. I hadn't raised my voice, hadn't matched their energy. The quiet command carried more weight than screaming could have. "Florence, sweetheart, we're trying to help," Mom began. "Get out. You've done enough damage. 2 months of denial, burned medical documents, insurance fraud with Dr. Montgomery. You want to pretend I'm not sick? Fine, but do it somewhere else. I have surgery tomorrow, and I won't spend my last day arguing with people who'd rather see me dead than admit they were wrong. If you proceed without our consent, you'll receive no financial support," Dad stated flatly. "No tuition, no rent, no insurance coverage. You'll be completely on your own." "I already am. The only difference is now I'll be honest about it." Maria stepped forward, positioning herself between my parents and the bed. "Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, I'm going to ask you to leave. Florence needs rest before surgery, and your presence is clearly distressing. We have every right to visit during regular hours if Florence permits it. Security is already aware of the situation. Please don't make this uglier than necessary." My parents stood frozen, realizing their usual tactics held no power here. Mom reached toward me, whether in supplication or accusation, I couldn't tell. Tyler blocked her approach, his athlete's frame creating an immovable barrier. "You're destroying our family," Mom whispered. "Everything we built, everything we worked for." "You destroyed it the day you chose reputation over my life," I replied. "Now leave, and don't come back unless you're ready to acknowledge what you've done." They left with threats of lawyers, of contested insurance claims, of total financial abandonment. The door closed on their fury, leaving blessed silence punctuated only by monitoring equipment. Maria immediately returned to her paperwork, adding notes about witness threats and documented coercion. "That was brave," she said gently. "Also necessary. Their denial could have interfered with your surgical consent." "Will they really cancel my insurance?" "They can try, but there are protections for ongoing treatment. We're expediting your independent coverage applications. The surgery tomorrow is already approved. They can't retroactively cancel that." Tyler collapsed in the visitor's chair, adrenaline leaving him shaky. "I can't believe they're still denying it. Even with proof, even with you lying in a hospital bed, they won't admit what they did." "They can't," I realized with sudden clarity. "Admitting I have cancer means admitting they nearly killed me. It means accepting that their perfect family image was built on lies. They'll never do that, not even to save my life." Maria's phone buzzed with a message. She read it with growing satisfaction, a rare smile breaking through her professional demeanor. "The hospital board just approved your full charity care application. Florence, your surgery and subsequent treatment are covered completely. Your parents' insurance is no longer necessary." The relief felt like physical weightlifting. No more fighting insurance companies about pre-existing conditions. No more dependency on parents who wielded financial support like a weapon. For the first time in months, I could focus on healing rather than battling bureaucracy. "There's more," Maria continued. "Jennifer Carlson from our legal team wants to meet with you this afternoon. She specializes in medical advocacy and believes you have grounds for both civil action and criminal charges if you choose to pursue them." Criminal charges: medical neglect causing substantial harm, financial abuse through controlled dependency, potentially fraud if Dr. Montgomery's false reports can be proven intentional rather than mistaken. The possibility felt overwhelming. Bad enough to fight cancer. Did I have energy to fight my parents in court? But then I thought of other young adults trapped by similar control, denied medical care by parents who preferred comfortable lies to uncomfortable truths. I'll meet with her, I decided. Not for revenge, but for documentation. So there's a record of what happened, why it happened, and how it could have been prevented. Maria nodded approvingly and left to arrange the meeting. Tyler and I sat in companionable silence processing the morning's chaos. Tomorrow's surgery loomed large, but for the first time I approached it free from my parents' suffocating influence. "I'll be here," Tyler said quietly, "during the surgery after through recovery. I know I'm just 18, but you're my brother. That's all that matters. Not the one who denied my illness or called me attention-seeking, but the one who chose to see truth even when it meant losing the parents we thought we had." He squeezed my hand and we sat watching morning transform to afternoon. Jennifer Carlson arrived precisely at 2, a sharp-featured woman whose power suit rivaled Dad's, but whose eyes held warmth his lacked. She took detailed notes about months of neglect, about burned documents and blocked phone calls, about a family history hidden to preserve false narratives. "You have an extremely strong case," she concluded, "both civil and criminal. But Florence, I want you to focus on tomorrow's surgery. Legal action can wait until you're recovered. This documentation simply preserves your options." By evening, my new life had taken shape. Bank accounts opened in my name alone, insurance approved, through hospital charity care legal documentation, preserving evidence of neglect. The tumor remained, cancer still threatened, but the secondary infection of toxic family dynamics had been excised as thoroughly as any surgeon could manage. Thomas arrived at sunset with more books and quiet encouragement. Diana brought photos from the gallery. Not documentation of decline, but images of beauty I'd captured before illness consumed everything. Jessica coordinated with nurses about post-operative care, her clinical knowledge, bridging friendship and medical necessity. "Your parents are still downstairs," Maria mentioned during her final evening visit. "They've been there all day demanding updates, threatening staff." "Let them sit," I said without guilt. "They had 2 months to act. They can have 1 night to think." But I knew they weren't thinking about their failures or my illness. They were crafting new narratives where they remained heroes in their own story, where their daughter's rebellion was just another challenge to overcome, through force of will and financial pressure. The cancer in my neck was real, but the malignancy in our family ran deeper than any tumor. Tomorrow, Dr. Kumar would attempt to cut out the physical manifestation of months of neglect, but the psychological surgery, removing myself from parents who loved their image more than their daughter, had already begun. Insurance battles would continue, legal proceedings might follow, but the essential break was complete. I'd chosen life over their lies. Everything else was just paperwork. Thursday arrived before dawn, the hospital stirring to life as surgical teams prepared for morning procedures. I'd barely slept, my mind cycling between anticipation and terror. In 6 hours, Dr. Kumar would attempt to remove the cancer that had taken over my neck, my life, my family's carefully constructed reality. Tyler had spent the night in the uncomfortable visitor's chair, refusing to leave, despite nurses' suggestions about proper rest. He stirred as the prep team arrived, immediately alert with the vigilance of someone standing guard. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, but his presence remained steady. The brother I needed, not the golden child our parents had created. "Morning, Florence. I'm Beth, your surgical nurse." The woman's competent movements spoke of countless pre-dawn preparations. "We need to get you ready for Dr. Kumar. How are you feeling?" "Terrified, ready, both." Beth smiled with practiced warmth. "That's exactly how you should feel. Major surgery is scary, but you've got one of the best surgical teams in the state. Now let's go over everything one more time." The preparation ritual began. Surgical consent forms, allergy confirmations marking the surgical site with purple ink. Each step moved me closer to the moment of truth, when skilled hands would attempt to undo months of denial's damage. Tyler held my hand through the procedures, his quarterback's grip steady despite the tremor I could feel beneath his skin. "Your parents arrived at 5 this morning," Beth mentioned carefully while adjusting my IV. "They're in the surgical waiting area demanding to speak with Dr. Kumar before the procedure." "They have no say in this," I said firmly, though my stomach clenched at their persistence. "Dr. Kumar is aware of the situation. Security has been briefed. Focus on yourself right now, not them." Easier said than done. Even facing cancer surgery, my parents' presence loomed like a secondary tumor impossible to fully excise. They'd spent the night crafting new strategies, preparing fresh denials ready to impose their will through sheer determination. Jessica arrived at 6:30, having abandoned her clinical rotation to be present. She wore scrubs, her nursing student badge, prominent, ready to advocate with medical knowledge my parents couldn't dismiss as easily as emotional appeals. "I've been reading about thyroid surgery all night," she said, producing highlighted printouts. "Recovery protocols, potential complications, medication management. We're going to get through this perfectly." The pronoun carried weight beyond grammar. "You think I'd let you recover alone? I've already arranged 2 weeks off from rotations. My apartment is ready. Shower chair installed. Medications, organized meal prep, planned. You're moving in the moment they discharge you." Diana swept in, next gallery elegance intact, despite the early hour. She carried a small wrapped package and the air of someone accustomed to managing crises with style. "A little pre-surgery gift," she said, pressing the box into my hands. "Something to remind you why you're fighting." Inside lay a vintage camera pendant, delicate silver work, capturing the essence of the tool I'd used to document beauty, while my own body betrayed me. The gesture broke through my careful composure, tears flowing freely as I clutched the necklace. "You have exhibitions to mount Florence, galleries to fill. This cancer is just an intermission, not a finale." Thomas arrived last, clutching coffee and looking uncomfortable in the medical setting. He'd closed the bookstore for the morning, prioritizing my surgery over commerce. The gesture spoke volumes from a man who rarely shuttered his beloved shop. "I know I'm not family," he began awkwardly, "but someone who isn't family needs to be here, to witness that you're loved beyond blood, valued beyond genetics." The room filled with chosen family as 7 o'clock approached. Dr. Kumar appeared precisely on time, surgical scrubs replacing yesterday's business attire. Her presence commanded attention, confidence radiating from every movement. "Good morning, Florence. Ready to evict your unwelcome tenant?" "More than ready." She reviewed the surgical plan once more, her hands sketching incision lines in the air. The tumor's size and infiltration meant extensive removal. Thyroid, lymph nodes, possibly muscle tissue. The surgery would take 6 to 8 hours, requiring delicate navigation around crucial structures. "There are risks," she stated plainly. "Vocal cord damage is possible given the tumor's position. Permanent hypothyroidism is certain since we're removing the entire thyroid. There's a chance we'll find more extensive spread than imaging suggests. But you can get it all. I'll do everything possible to achieve clear margins. Your age works in your favor. Young tissue heals, better tolerates aggressive surgery more successfully. I'm optimistic, Florence, but I won't make promises until I see what we're dealing with internally." A commotion in the hallway interrupted our discussion. Raised voices, authoritative demands, security's firm responses. My parents had escalated their campaign, trying to force their way into preoperative areas through sheer entitlement. "Dr. Kumar, we need to speak with you immediately." Dad's voice carried through closed doors. "This surgery is being performed without proper consent." "She's 20 years old," Dr. Kumar called back without moving from my bedside. "Her consent is all I require. We're her parents, her insurance holders. We have rights." "You have the right to wait in designated areas like every other family. Security, please escort the Mitchells back to the surgical waiting room." The sounds of protest faded as security intervened. Dr. Kumar turned back to me, her expression mixing sympathy with steel. "They can't stop this, Florence. You're my patient, not them. I protect my patients." The anesthesia team arrived for their pre-operative interview. More forms, more confirmations, more careful preparations for the chemical sleep that would carry me through trauma toward healing. Each professional treated me with respect my parents had denied, acknowledging my autonomy, my choices, my right to fight the cancer they'd pretended didn't exist. "Time to head to pre-op," Beth announced at 7:45. "Who's your designated contact person?" "Tyler Mitchell, my brother." "I'll be right here." Tyler promised, his voice thick with emotion. "The whole time. When you wake up, I'll be the first person you see." The goodbye ritual began. Jessica kissed my forehead, promising recovery plans already in motion. Diana squeezed my hands, reminding me of future exhibitions waiting to be curated. Thomas offered quiet encouragement, the bookstore's piece distilled into simple words. Each farewell carried weight. Acknowledgement that surgery bore risks, that saying goodbye mattered even with optimistic prognoses. Tyler walked beside my gurney as far as allowed our hands linked until the last possible moment. At the surgical suite doors, he had to let go. For an instant, I saw not my 18-year-old brother, but the little boy who'd crawled into my bed during thunderstorms seeking comfort from a big sister who'd always protected him. "I love you, Flor. Come back to us." "Always, baby brother. Always." The surgical suite gleamed with sterile promise. Masked figures moved with choreographed precision, each playing their part in the battle ahead. They transferred me to the operating table, its narrow surface soon to become my battlefield. Dr. Kumar appeared above me, her eyes visible above surgical mask. "I'm going to take excellent care of you, Florence. When you wake up, that tumor will be gone." The anesthesia mask descended, chemical sleep racing through my veins. My last coherent thought wasn't about cancer or parents or the uncertain future. Instead, I thought about the camera pendant Diana had given me, about capturing light in darkness, about choosing to see beauty even when shadows threatened to consume everything. "Count backward from 10, the anesthesiologist instructed. 10, 9, 8. The world faded, but not into darkness, into possibility, into the space between ending and beginning, where surgical knives would write new chapters in flesh and hope. Somewhere beyond the chemical veil Dr. Kumar was scrubbing in, preparing to undo months of denial with skilled hands and sharp steel. My parents sat in the waiting room, probably still crafting narratives where they remained blameless. But their version of truth no longer mattered. What mattered was the tumor leaving my body, the cancer being excised, the chance at life their denial had nearly stolen. Tyler would be there when I woke. Jessica would guide my recovery. Diana and Thomas would provide support my blood family couldn't. Dr. Kumar would do her best to save me from both disease and those who'd enabled its growth. Surgery was beginning. The real fight. Not just against cancer, but for autonomy, for truth, for the right to seek help when those who should protect you prefer comfortable lies, would be won or lost in the next 8 hours. But I was ready. Scarred but not broken. Betrayed but not beaten. The tumor might have taken months of my life, but it wouldn't take my future. Not if Dr. Kumar had anything to say about it. The anesthesia pulled me under completely, and I surrendered to the healing darkness, trusting strangers, more than family, choosing truth over denial, even unconscious. Time moves differently under anesthesia. There's no dreaming, no awareness, just a vast nothing between counting backward and the slow swim back to consciousness. 8 hours compressed into a heartbeat, though for those waiting, each minute stretched like twisted wire. The first thing I noticed was the breathing tube. Not painful exactly, but wrong. A foreign presence where breath should flow naturally. Voices murmured nearby, professional and calm, discussing numbers that meant nothing through the medication fog. Someone squeezed my hand, and even through the haze, I recognized Tyler's touch. "She's waking up," his voice cracked with relief. Florence, can you hear me?" I tried to respond, but the tube prevented speech. My eyes fluttered open to harsh recovery room lights, faces slowly coming into focus. Tyler on my right, tears streaming down his face. Jessica on my left, wearing scrubs and a visitor badge, her nursing knowledge evident in how she tracked the monitors. Behind them, Dr. Kumar still in surgical attire, exhaustion clear, but satisfaction clearer. "Welcome back, Florence." Dr. Kumar moved closer, checking my pupils with a penlight. "Don't try to talk yet. The breathing tube will come out soon. The surgery went well. Better than well. We got it all." The words penetrated slowly. Got it all. The tumor-gone cancer excised months of denied illness, finally addressed. I squeezed Tyler's hand weakly, trying to convey questions I couldn't voice. The mass was larger than imaging suggested, Dr. Kumar continued. 7 centimeters when we got inside with tentacles reaching toward your spine, but we achieved clear margins. Every bit of cancer we could see is gone. 7 centimeters. The size of a baseball growing in my neck while my parents insisted on psychological problems. How close had I come to inoperability days hours? The breathing tube prevented the sob building in my chest, emotion trapped behind medical necessity. There were complications. Dr. Kumar's tone gentled. The tumor had wrapped around your left vocal cord nerve. We had to sacrifice some tissue to ensure complete removal. There may be voice changes, possibly permanent. But Florence, you're alive. That's what matters. Voice changes seemed insignificant compared to the alternative. I'd have accepted muteness for the chance to survive what my parents' denial had cultivated. I tried to nod, but movement sent lightning through surgical sites. Everything hurt with the deep ache of major trauma, but it was healing hurt, the kind that meant progress rather than decline. They're moving you to recovery soon. Jessica explained, her professional mask not quite hiding personal concern. I've already coordinated with the nurses about your care plan. Tyler hasn't left your side once during the entire surgery. 8 hours. My baby brother had sat in uncomfortable waiting room chairs for 8 hours, fielding updates from surgical nurses, maintaining vigil, while our parents— the question must have shown in my eyes because Tyler's expression darkened. They stayed until about hour 3. When Dr. Kumar came out to say the tumor was more extensive than expected, Mom had what I can only call a breakdown. Dad took her home. They haven't been back. Even facing evidence carved from their daughter's neck, they couldn't accept truth. Somewhere across the city, they were probably constructing new narratives. The surgery was excessive, the doctors were lying, the tumor would have resolved naturally. Their denial ran deeper than any scalpel could reach. The respiratory therapist arrived to assess my readiness for extubation. The process of removing the breathing tube was unpleasant, but brief, leaving me coughing and gasping, but finally able to speak. Thank you. The words came out raspy, barely audible, but mine. Don't strain your voice, Dr. Kumar warned. The nerve manipulation means everything will feel different for a while. Whispers only when necessary. They transferred me to a private room as afternoon faded toward evening. The surgical site was bandaged, extensively drains, placed to prevent fluid accumulation. Every movement hurt, but it was productive pain, the kind that meant healing rather than dying. Jessica immediately began her unofficial nursing duties, adjusting pillows and checking outputs with practiced efficiency. Diana and Thomas have been texting constantly, Tyler reported, showing me his phone. The whole bookstore community is asking about you. Mrs. Patterson sent a prayer circle into overdrive, apparently. The outpouring of concern from relative strangers stood in stark contrast to our parents' absence. These people who owed me nothing had spent the day worrying, praying, caring about the outcome of my surgery. Meanwhile, the 2 people who should have been first in line had fled when reality became too uncomfortable to deny. Dr. Kumar returned for evening rounds, bringing additional news. The pathology team is running detailed analysis on the removed tissue, but preliminary examination confirms papillary thyroid carcinoma with aggressive features. We'll need to discuss radiation therapy once you're healed from surgery. But you got it all. The whisper hurt but felt necessary. Every visible piece. The margins were clear, meaning no cancer cells at the edges of removed tissue. That's the best outcome we could hope for given the tumor's size. She explained the recovery process: weeks of healing, lifetime thyroid replacement medication, regular monitoring for recurrence. The scar would be significant, running across the base of my neck like a second smile. But scars meant survival, visible proof of battles won, rather than denied. Your body tolerated the surgery remarkably well for such an extensive procedure. Youth is on your side, Florence. I expect a full recovery. After she left, Jessica helped me sip water, the simple act of swallowing strange with swollen tissues and surgical trauma. Everything felt different. Breathing, turning my head, existing in a body no longer harboring a secret tumor. The absence was as noticeable as the presence had been phantom weight, where real mass once grew. "I've been thinking," Tyler said quietly as evening settled over the hospital. "About Mom and Dad, about everything. Do you think they'll ever admit what they did?" "No." The word whispered past damaged vocal cords carried years of understanding. They've spent my entire life creating a perfect family narrative. Admitting they nearly killed me to maintain it would destroy everything they believe about themselves. So what do? We live without them. Build our own family from people who see truth instead of convenient fiction. The next hours passed in a medication haze. Nurses checked vitals, adjusted pain management, monitored the drains collecting bloody fluid. Jessica took notes on everything, preparing for when she'd manage my care outside hospital walls. Tyler dozed in his chair, and never leaving mine, anchoring me to consciousness when medication tried to pull me under. Near midnight, commotion in the hallway announced unwelcome visitors. My parents had returned, voices raised in familiar patterns of demand and entitlement. Through the door's window, I could see security blocking their advance, the same guards who'd protected my autonomy throughout this ordeal. "We have every right to see our daughter." Mom's voice carried despite the late hour. "Visiting hours ended at 9, ma'am. The patient needs rest after major surgery." The security guard's tone suggested this wasn't his first encounter with difficult family. "She's our child. You can't keep us from her. She's an adult who's specified approved visitors. You're not on the list. Please return during regular visiting hours tomorrow, if she chooses to see you." The argument continued, but I turned away, unwilling to waste energy on their drama. They'd had chances, 62 days of chances, to act like parents. Now faced with the consequences of their denial, they wanted to reclaim authority they'd abdicated through neglect. "Should I go talk to them?" Tyler asked, awakened by the noise. "No, let security handle it. You're here, Jess is here. That's all the family I need tonight." Eventually, the hallway quieted, my parents retreating in defeat. Tomorrow would bring new battles, discussions of radiation recovery, planning the ongoing estrangement from those who should have protected me. But tonight was for healing, for adjusting to life without the tumor that had paradoxically saved me by forcing truth into light. The surgical site throbbed with each heartbeat. Drains collected evidence of trauma, and my voice might never fully return. But I was alive. Dr. Kumar had done what my parents wouldn't, acknowledged the cancer, and fought to remove it. 8 hours of surgery had accomplished what 2 months of denial couldn't given me a chance at a future. As medication pulled me toward sleep, I thought about the camera pendant Diana had given me, now safely stored with my belongings. Photography was about capturing light and shadow, finding beauty in truth rather than comfortable lies. My neck would bear scars, forever proof of battles fought and won. But scars told stories, and this story, of survival despite those who preferred my death to their discomfort, was worth telling. The monitors beeped steadily. Jessica made notes for tomorrow's care, and Tyler kept vigil against parents who might return. I'd entered surgery with cancer and family who denied it. I'd emerged with the cancer gone, and a different family entirely. One built on truth rather than blood, on choice rather than obligation. It was a fair trade, more than fair. It was the beginning of a life I'd choose to live. 5 days post-surgery, I sat propped in the hospital bed, watching sunrise paint the walls golden. The breathing tube was a memory. The drains had been removed yesterday, and my voice was slowly returning as a hoarse whisper. Each small improvement felt monumental after months of decline, proof that bodies could heal when given the chance my parents had denied. Grandmother Eleanor entered quietly, having driven through the night from Richmond. At 75, she moved with careful determination, her silver hair pinned back and her face showing every hour of worry since Tyler had finally answered her blocked calls. She paused in the doorway, taking in the bandages, the healing incision, the evidence of what her daughter had tried to hide. "Oh, my darling girl." She crossed to my bed in quick steps, gathering me in the gentlest embrace. "I'm so sorry. I should have fought harder, should have insisted." "Not your fault," I whispered against her shoulder. "They would have found ways to stop you, too." Eleanor pulled back to study my face, her fingers ghosting near the bandages with practiced care. She'd done this before I realized. Sat beside a young woman recovering from thyroid surgery, helpless against family denial. But Margaret hadn't survived, and that failure haunted every line in my grandmother's face. Tyler told me everything. The insurance fraud, the burned papers, Dr. Montgomery's lies. Her voice hardened with each word. "I've already contacted my attorney. What they did goes beyond neglect into criminal territory." "Grandmother." "No, Florence. I failed Margaret by staying quiet, by believing Sarah would do better. I won't fail you the same way." She produced a folder from her handbag, legal documents visible within. "I've liquidated part of my retirement. It's not a fortune, but it's enough to ensure you're never financially dependent on them again." The gesture broke something loose in my chest. Here was family acting as family should, protecting, providing, supporting without conditions or denial. Tears came freely as I accepted the folder, finding bank statements and trust documentation inside. $30,000, enough for recovery, for school, for building a life free from their control. "I can't accept this." "You can, and you will. It's what I should have done for Margaret, but couldn't afford then. I've lived 20 years with that regret. Let me do this right for once." Tyler arrived as visiting hours officially began, carrying coffee and the exhausted look of someone managing crisis on multiple fronts. He'd been fielding calls from our parents, maintaining apartment searches for my post-discharge needs, and somehow keeping up with his football commitments. At 18, he'd aged years in a week. "Mom called 6 times last night," he reported wearily. "She's convinced the doctors are lying about the pathology results, that it was really just a benign cyst they removed unnecessarily." Even now, Eleanor's disgust was palpable, even with evidence literally carved from her daughter's neck. She's created an entire alternate narrative, says the hospital is covering up malpractice, that they pushed unnecessary surgery for profit. Dad's backing her completely. They're talking about suing Dr. Kumar. The delusion ran so deep that successful cancer surgery became malpractice in their minds. They'd rather believe in vast medical conspiracies than accept they'd failed as parents. It would have been funny if it weren't so pathologically sad. Jennifer Carlson arrived at 10 sharp, her legal expertise, a sharp contrast to my family's emotional chaos. She'd been building a case file all week, documenting everything from the burned referral to post-surgical denial. Her briefcase contained enough evidence to bury my parents in legal consequences if I chose that path. "The county prosecutor is interested," she said without preamble. "Medical neglect causing substantial harm insurance fraud through false reporting conspiracy with Dr. Montgomery to deny care. These are serious charges, Florence." Would it change anything, make them see truth? Jennifer's expression softened. Probably not. People this deep in denial rarely accept reality even when faced with legal consequences, but it would create a record, potentially protect others from similar harm, and ensure they face some accountability. And destroy their lives completely. "They nearly destroyed yours," Tyler interjected fiercely. "Why protect them when they wouldn't protect you?" But I was already past revenge, focused on rebuilding rather than retribution. The cancer was gone. My life was saved, despite their efforts, and I had support they'd never provided. Pursuing criminal charges would keep me tethered to their toxicity when I wanted only to move forward. Document everything, I decided. File reports so there's a record, but I don't want to press charges unless they interfere with my recovery or try to control me again. Jennifer nodded, making notes. We'll maintain protective documentation. If they escalate, we're ready. For now, focus on healing. The conversation shifted to practical matters. Jessica had prepared her apartment for my arrival, installing safety equipment and organizing medications with nursing school precision. Diana had arranged reduced hours at the gallery once I felt ready to return. Thomas offered flexible bookstore shifts around medical appointments. Everyone had rallied to create the support network my parents should have been. "There's something else," Eleanor said once Jennifer departed. "I've been going through family documents trying to understand how we got here. I found something you need to see." She produced a weathered envelope yellow with age. Inside, pages of medical history spanning generations far more extensive than Tyler's attic discoveries. Charts tracking thyroid disease through maternal lines, recommendations for screening genetic counseling reports, highlighting our family's particular vulnerability. "This report is from 35 years ago," Eleanor explained. "When Sarah was 15 and Margaret 12, I had it done after my sister died young from the same cancer. The geneticist was clear. All female descendants needed annual screening starting at 18. Mom knew at 15 that she was at risk. More than knew, she was terrified, convinced herself that positive thinking and denial could override genetics. When Margaret developed symptoms at 23, Sarah refused to believe it was the family curse, said Margaret was manifesting illness through fear. The pattern crystallized with horrible clarity. Mom hadn't just denied my illness, she'd been practicing denial her entire life, convinced that acknowledging genetic risk would somehow manifest it. In trying to protect herself from fear, she'd made that fear reality for both her sister and daughter. After Margaret died, Sarah became obsessed with creating a perfect family image. No illness, no weakness, no acknowledgement of genetic vulnerability. I think she genuinely believed that if she never spoke of it, never allowed testing, it couldn't touch her children. Magical thinking. Jessica observed from her corner where she'd been organizing my medications. We see it in healthcare. People who believe acknowledging illness gives it power, so they deny symptoms until it's too late. "But I'm not too late," I whispered, touching the bandages that marked my survival. "Despite everything, I'm here. Because you're stronger than the women who came before," Eleanor said firmly. "You fought through their denial, found your own support, saved yourself when they wouldn't. That ends the family pattern more effectively than any genetic counseling." We sat with that truth as morning became afternoon. Outside, life continued in its ordinary patterns, while inside, 3 generations of women reckoned with the weight of inherited trauma. Eleanor had lost a daughter to denial. Mom had lost a sister, and now a daughter to the same. But I'd broken the chain-chosen treatment over comfortable lies. The pathology report came back. Dr. Kumar announced during afternoon rounds. Papillary carcinoma with aggressive features but all margins clear. No lymph node involvement beyond what we removed. With radiation therapy, your prognosis is excellent. Good news delivered simply without drama or false comfort. After months of medical professionals who wouldn't even look at my neck, Dr. Kumar's straightforward approach felt revolutionary. She treated me as a competent adult facing serious illness, not a hysterical child inventing symptoms. "When can I go home, or rather to Jessica's?" "Tomorrow, if you continue improving. Your surgical site is healing beautifully. Swallowing has normalized and pain is managing well. Jessica seems prepared for home care." "Beyond prepared," Jessica confirmed. "I might have gone slightly overboard with supplies, but better overprepared than under." As Dr. Kumar left, my phone buzzed with a message from Diana. Photos from the gallery, my work still hanging despite my absence, sales continuing with proceeds held for my return. Life existed beyond hospital walls, beyond family drama, beyond cancer. A future waited scarred, but possible. That evening, Tyler brought dinner from my favorite restaurant food I could actually swallow without pain. We ate quietly, processing the week's revelations and planning tomorrow's discharge. Jessica would pick me up at 10, Eleanor would help settle me in, and Tyler would handle any parental interference. "They'll show up eventually," Tyler warned. Once they realize you're really not coming home, they'll escalate. Let them. I have legal documentation, medical proof, and witnesses to their neglect. They have comfortable lies and Dr. Montgomery's fraudulent reports. See how far that gets them. But even as I spoke bravely, part of me mourned the parents I'd never had. The ones who would have rushed me to specialists at the first sign of illness, who would have prioritized my health over their image, who would have held my hand through surgery instead of fleeing when reality intruded. "Do you think they ever loved us?" Tyler asked quietly, "or just the idea of us?" "I think they loved us the only way they knew how, conditionally with strings attached to their version of perfection. When I stopped fitting that version, their love stopped too." "That's not really love then, is it?" "No," I admitted, "it's not." We sat with that recognition as visiting hours ended. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, discharge planning, radiation discussions, the reality of recovery outside hospital walls. But tonight was for acknowledging truths our family had spent decades denying. The cancer was gone, excised by skilled hands and sharp steel. The denial that fed it remained, but its power over me had ended. I'd found my voice despite vocal cord damage, found my family, despite blood betrayals, found my future, despite their preference for my death over their discomfort. The scar across my neck would fade, but never disappear. Good. Some stories needed permanent reminders, some truths demanded visible proof. I'd wear my survival like jewelry decoration earned through battle with both disease and those who enabled it. Recovery would be slow radiation therapy, challenging, and the estrangement from my parents painful despite its necessity. But I was alive to face those challenges, supported by people who saw truth clearly and chose love without conditions. That was more than Margaret had, more than generations of women who died young from treatable disease, silenced by family shame and genetic denial. I'd broken the pattern simply by surviving, by refusing to die quietly to preserve their comfort. Tomorrow, real recovery would begin. Tonight, revelation was enough. 2 weeks into recovery at Jessica's apartment, my voice had strengthened from whisper to rasp, and the surgical site had begun its transformation from wound to scar. The one-bedroom space had become command central for both medical recovery and legal preparation, with Jennifer Carlson visiting daily to build an ironclad documentation trail. This article runs tomorrow. Jennifer announced, placing a printed draft on the coffee table that doubled as my desk. "Amanda Wright wants your approval on the final version." The journalist had interviewed me 3 days ago, her questions precise but compassionate. The resulting article laid bare 2 months of medical neglect, complete with Diana's photographic documentation and statements from Thomas Dr. Kumar and others who'd witnessed my decline. Reading my story in black and white felt surreal truth, finally given the permanence my parents had tried to deny. The headline might seem sensational, Jennifer warned. "Parents' denial nearly costs daughter's life. A young woman's fight against family medical neglect." But Amanda felt it necessary to grab attention. "It's accurate," I said, voice still rough but determined. "Every word is true." Jessica read over my shoulder, her medical knowledge adding weight to each documented symptom. The timeline was damning. From first discovery to emergency surgery, a clear progression of negligence that no reasonable parent could explain away. Yet I knew my parents would try, had probably already crafted narratives where they remained heroes in their own story. "There's something else," Jennifer said carefully. "Dr. Montgomery's medical board hearing is next month. The state is investigating his false reports about your psychological condition. He's claiming your parents misled him, that he never actually examined you." Which is true. He never saw me, just signed whatever they asked. "Exactly. His defense actually strengthens our case against your parents. He's throwing them under the bus to save his license." The irony wasn't lost on me. Their golf buddy, their convenient medical enabler, would now testify to their deception to protect himself. The comfortable network of denial was cannibalizing itself when faced with legal consequences. Tyler arrived from class dropping his backpack with exhaustion that had become familiar. He'd been managing his coursework football practice and supporting me while fielding increasingly frantic calls from our parents. They'd realized I wasn't returning, that their financial threats held no power, and panic was setting in. Mom showed up at practice today. He reported, collapsing beside me on Jessica's worn couch. Made a scene about family loyalty and ungrateful children. Coach had to escort her off the field. Public meltdown. Jessica asked, already documenting the incident in our growing file. Complete breakdown. Screaming about conspiracies about the hospital poisoning my mind against them. Half the team filmed it. He pulled out his phone, showing a video that made my stomach clench. Mom stood on the sidelines in her perfect suburban outfit, but her composure had shattered completely. She gestured wildly, voice shrill with hysteria, accusing unnamed forces of stealing her children. The woman who'd spent decades maintaining appearances was self-destructing, publicly denial, finally consuming the person it had protected. This helps our case, Jennifer observed clinically. Public documentation of unstable behavior harassment at your brother's school. If they try to claim competency to make medical decisions, this undermines them completely. But watching my mother unravel brought no satisfaction. This was mental illness of a different kind. The decades-long delusion that perfection could be maintained through denial, that acknowledging imperfection meant personal failure. She'd built her entire identity on lies, and now those lies were collapsing. Has Dad tried to contact you? I asked Tyler. Once. Very corporate, very controlled. Offered to pay for my college if I convince you to drop any legal action and come home. When I refused, he threatened to cut me off completely. Tyler, you don't have to... Yes, I do. You nearly died because I was too young and stupid to see through their bullshit. The least I can do is stand by you now. Eleanor called during lunch, her daily check-in consistent as sunrise. She'd returned to Richmond but remained involved coordinating with Jennifer and ensuring my financial independence. Her own health was fragile, but she'd found renewed purpose in protecting the grandchild she'd nearly lost. I heard about Sarah's performance at the school, she said without preamble. Robert called demanding I talk sense into you both. I told him the only sensible thing was accepting responsibility for nearly killing you. How did he take that? Hung up on me. But Florence, I'm worried. This kind of public breakdown, the escalating behavior, your mother is becoming dangerous to herself and others. Has Jennifer discussed restraining orders? The thought of legally barring my parents from contact felt like another death, but Eleanor was right. Their denial had shifted from passive neglect to active harassment. Tyler's education was being disrupted, my recovery threatened by their escalating attempts at control. We'll discuss it, I promised, though the words tasted bitter. The afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. Dr. Hayes appeared with a box of my photography equipment from school salvaged from the chaos of medical leave. But her real purpose became clear as she settled at our makeshift dining table. I've been documenting everything, Florence. Not just your physical decline, but your academic work correlation. Your projects from before diagnosis show consistent excellence. As symptoms worsened, your technical skill remained, but artistic vision narrowed to themes of body horror, confinement, mortality. She spread out prints from my portfolio, a visual timeline of unconscious recognition. Early work celebrated light and life, but recent projects had grown dark, focused on decay and distortion. My subconscious had known what my parents denied, expressing through art what I couldn't voice directly. This is powerful evidence of prolonged suffering, Dr. Hayes continued. No student consciously chooses such dramatic thematic shifts without underlying cause. Your work documented your illness when no one else would. Could you testify to that? Jennifer asked, already seeing legal applications. Absolutely. I've written a detailed analysis connecting her artistic evolution to symptom progression. It's compelling proof that her illness was real, prolonged, and psychologically impactful, despite family denial. The box also contained my camera. my artistic eye intact, despite everything. I held it carefully, reacquainting myself with its familiar weight. Diana had been right. I had exhibitions to mount stories to tell. But first, I had to finish surviving this one. "There's been a development," Jennifer announced after Dr. Hayes departed. "The prosecutor wants to meet Monday. They're considering charges against your parents with or without your cooperation. The evidence is too substantial to ignore." "What kind of charges?" "Felony medical neglect, insurance fraud, conspiracy to deny medical care. If convicted, they'd face prison time." The words hung heavy in Jessica's small living room. Prison. My parents, who'd valued reputation above all else, facing the ultimate public shame. Part of me recoiled from that possibility, the child who still wanted parental love despite everything. But the larger part, the woman who'd nearly died from their neglect, recognized justice when offered. "What do you need from me?" "Testimony if it goes to trial. But Florence, think carefully. Criminal prosecution means public trial media coverage, your family's dysfunction exposed completely. It's not a decision to make lightly." "They made their decision the day they burned my referral," I said quietly. "Every day after was another choice to let me die rather than admit imperfection. If prosecution prevents another family from suffering the same, then I'll testify." Jennifer nodded, making notes. "I'll inform the prosecutor. In the meantime, focus on your radiation consultation Thursday. Legal battles can wait. Your health comes first." As evening approached, the apartment filled with the quiet sounds of recovery. Jessica prepared medications with nursing precision. Tyler studied at the kitchen table, and I sat by the window, watching life continue beyond our small sanctuary. The surgical scar had begun to itch, a sign of healing that felt like victory after months of decline. My phone buzzed with a message from Diana. The gallery's fundraiser for my medical expenses had exceeded goals, the community rallying around one of their own. Thomas had added a donation jar at the bookstore, customers contributing with notes of encouragement. Strangers were showing more care than my parents ever had. "You know what's strange?" I said to the room at large. "I'm happier now with cancer and family estrangement than I was 6 months ago living their lie." "Because you're free," Jessica observed. "Free to be sick when you're sick, healthy when you're healthy, human instead of perfect." Tyler looked up from his textbook. "I've been thinking about Aunt Margaret a lot. How different things might have been if she'd survived, if we'd known about the genetic risk early." "She didn't have what Florence has," Jessica pointed out. "A support network outside family, financial resources, legal advocates. She died not just from cancer, but from isolation." We broke the pattern, hon, I realized, not just by surviving, but by refusing to be silent about it. Tomorrow's newspaper would carry my story, complete with photographs documenting months of decline. My parents would rage against public exposure, claim victimization by ungrateful children and predatory media. But truth, once released, couldn't be recaptured by comfortable lies. The legal case was building piece by documented piece. Medical records, photographic evidence, witness statements, academic documentation, all painting a clear picture of deliberate neglect. Whether criminal charges followed or not, the record would exist. No one could claim ignorance or accident. But beyond legal preparations lay the quieter work of healing, learning to swallow without pain, building strength for radiation therapy, reclaiming art and purpose beyond survival. The cancer might be gone, but recovery meant more than physical healing. It meant building a life authentic enough to be worth saving. As night fell, I touched the camera. Dr. Hayes had returned. Soon I'd be strong enough to document this journey myself, to capture truth through my own lens rather than others' testimony. The exhibition Diana had mentioned felt possible again, art born from ashes of medical neglect and family betrayal. "Thank you," I said to the room at large, "all of you, for seeing what they wouldn't, for acting when they didn't." "Family isn't just blood," Tyler responded. "It's choice, and we choose you, Floor, scars and all." The article would run tomorrow, legal machinery would grind forward, and my parents would face consequences they'd spent decades avoiding. But tonight was for chosen family and quiet healing, for recognizing that survival meant more than simply not dying. It meant living truthfully even when truth came with scars across your throat and empty spaces where parents should have been. That was its own kind of victory worth more than any comfortable lie could ever provide. The article hit like a thunderclap across our small city. Parents' denial nearly costs daughter's life ran on the front page of the lifestyle section, complete with Diana's haunting photographs documenting my physical decline. By noon, the newspaper's website had logged thousands of views and hundreds of comments, our family's dysfunction laid bare for public consumption. I sat in Jessica's living room laptop, open to the digital edition, watching the story spread across social media. Each share felt like another crack in the facade my parents had spent decades constructing. Their perfect suburban narrative was crumbling in real-time truth viral in ways their lies could never be. Channel 6 wants an interview. Jennifer reported fielding calls on her cell. 3 other news outlets have reached out. This has struck a nerve. Apparently, medical neglect by image-conscious parents is more common than people admit. No interviews yet. I decided my voice stronger but still bearing the hoarseness that might be permanent. Let the article speak for itself. Tyler had skipped morning classes anticipating fallout. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from teammates, classmates, and extended family members who discovered our situation through public exposure rather than private communication. The family's secrets were secrets, no more. At 2:47 p.m., the doorbell rang with the aggressive insistence of people who expected immediate compliance. Through the peephole, I saw my parents standing in the hallway, their faces masks of barely controlled fury. Mom clutched printouts of the article, her knuckles white against the paper. Dad stood behind her, his expression cycling between rage and something that might have been fear. "I know you're in there, Florence." Mom's voice carried through the door. "We need to talk, now." Jessica moved toward her bedroom where her phone waited ready to call security if needed. Tyler positioned himself between me and the door protective instincts in overdrive. But I was done hiding. Done letting others fight my battles. "Let them in," I said quietly. "But keep that door open, and Jennifer, please stay." Tyler unlocked the door reluctantly. My parents burst through like avenging angels, though their divine mission had curdled into something darker. Mom's perfect makeup was smeared, her usually immaculate hair disheveled. Dad's tie hung askew, his corporate armor failing him. "How dare you?" Mom began waving the printouts like weapons. "How dare you air our private matters to the world? Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Told the truth," I suggested from my spot on the couch, refusing to stand for their dramatics. "Truth." Dad's laugh was bitter. "You call this character assassination truth. You've destroyed our reputation, our standing in the community, everything we've worked for." "Everything you valued more than my life," I interrupted. "Yes, I know exactly what I've destroyed." Mom sank into a chair, uninvited, the fight momentarily leaving her. Up close, I could see the toll the morning had taken. Phone calls from friends demanding explanations, social media posts questioning their parenting, the careful construct of perfection shattered beyond repair. "We did what we thought was best," she said plaintively. "We were protecting you from the fear that consumed Margaret. Margaret died because she couldn't afford treatment. I nearly died because you could afford it but chose not to, which is worse, Mom. Which death would have been more preventable." The question hung between us, unanswerable in its brutal clarity. Dad began pacing his business instincts, seeking angles and leverage in a situation that had none. Jennifer watched silently, documenting every word for potential legal proceedings. "The surgeon called it aggressive cancer," Tyler said quietly. 7 centimeters wrapped around her vocal cords. Another month and it would have been inoperable. You were literally weeks away from murdering your daughter through neglect. "We didn't know," Dad started. "Because you refused to look." My voice cracked, emotion overwhelming the careful control I'd maintained. I begged you to feel it, to see doctors, to believe me. You burned my referral, committed insurance fraud, gaslit me for 2 months while cancer grew unchecked. That's not protection. That's attempted murder through willful ignorance. Mom flinched at the words, her face crumbling. For a moment, I saw past the denial to the terrified woman, beneath the one who'd watched her sister die young and responded by building elaborate fortresses against reality. But understanding the source of dysfunction didn't excuse its consequences. "The hospital is lying," she said weakly, grasping at familiar straws. "The tumor wasn't that large, wasn't that dangerous. They exaggerated to justify unnecessary surgery." Stop. The command came out stronger than intended, powered by weeks of recovery and truth. Just stop. Dr. Kumar photographed everything. The tumor, the extraction, the clear margins that barely saved my life. Your denial can't change physical evidence. "You've ruined us," Dad said flatly, abandoning persuasion for accusation. "My firm is already questioning my judgment. Your mother's been asked to step down from 3 charity boards. Tyler's being harassed at school." "I'm not being harassed," Tyler corrected firmly. "People are asking why I'm supporting Florence. When I tell them the truth, they're horrified by what you did not, what she revealed." "This is what you wanted, isn't it?" Mom turned on me with sudden venom. "To punish us, to destroy everything we built. I wanted to live." The words tore from my damaged throat. "That's all I ever wanted, to get medical care for a life-threatening condition. You're the ones who turned it into a battle, who made it about reputation and image and maintaining your precious, perfect family facade." Family doesn't air dirty laundry in public. Dad insisted, falling back on familiar maxims. "Family doesn't let family die to avoid embarrassment," Jennifer interjected smoothly. "Your daughter sought help through appropriate channels for months. You blocked every attempt. Public exposure became her only option for survival." "Who are you?" Mom demanded, noticing Jennifer for the first time. "Jennifer Carlson, attorney. I'm documenting this conversation for potential criminal proceedings against you both." The word criminal changed the room's dynamic entirely. Dad stopped pacing, his face draining of color. Mom's hands began to shake printouts, rustling with her tremors. They'd expected family drama, not legal consequences. "Criminal charges. For trying to protect our daughter from unnecessary medical anxiety." Dad's corporate voice emerged, the one he used for hostile negotiations. "For medical neglect resulting in substantial bodily harm. For insurance fraud. For conspiracy with Dr. Montgomery to file false reports." Jennifer's tone remained professionally pleasant. "The prosecutor is very interested in your case. Apparently, parents denying children medical care to maintain appearances is a growing problem they'd like to address." "You're going to have us arrested." Mom's voice rose to near hysteria. "Your own parents. The people who raised you, fed you, clothed you. The people who nearly killed me through neglect," I finished. "Who valued their comfort over my life. Who still can't admit what they did, even with evidence carved from my neck." I pulled down my turtleneck collar, revealing the healing scar that ran across my throat. Pink and puckered, still angry from recent trauma, it testified to truths they couldn't deny. Mom recoiled as if the scar might be contagious. Dad looked away entirely. "That's what denial looks like," I said quietly. "That's what 2 months of protecting me from anxiety created. A 7-centimeter tumor that almost cost me my voice and my life." "We'll fight this," Dad declared, rallying his corporate defenses. "We have resources, connections. No prosecutor will pursue charges against respectable citizens based on family disagreements." "They already are," Jennifer informed him. "Your respectability ended the moment you chose reputation over your daughter's life. The evidence is overwhelming the case strong. Your choices now are about damage control, not avoiding consequences." Mom broke first, tears streaming down her face as reality finally penetrated decades of denial. "We were so scared," she whispered. "After Margaret, after watching her waste away, I couldn't face it happening again. So you guaranteed it would by denying treatment. Tyler said his youth making the logic more brutal. How does that make sense? How does letting Florence die prevent Margaret's death? It doesn't. Mom admitted the words, seeming to surprise her. Nothing makes sense anymore. We built our whole lives on being the perfect family, the ones without problems or weaknesses or genetic curses. And now you're the family who nearly killed their daughter through neglect. I finished. The ones whose dysfunction made headlines. The cautionary tale about valuing image over truth. Dad's phone rang, his office tone sharp. Whatever he heard made his face darken further. When he hung up, he looked older, smaller, defeated in ways corporate battles had never achieved. That was my managing partner. I'm being placed on administrative leave pending investigation into the insurance fraud allegations. He turned to Mom with hollow eyes. We've lost everything. No, I corrected firmly. You lost me. Everything else is just consequences. They left differently than they'd arrived. Mom shuffled like a broken doll, Dad's commanding presence reduced to middle-aged uncertainty. In the doorway, Mom turned back, something desperate in her expression. Do you hate us? The question deserved honesty. I hate what you did. I hate that you chose comfortable lies over uncomfortable truths. I hate that I nearly died because you couldn't face reality. But hate takes energy I need for healing. So no, I don't hate you. I nothing you, which might be worse. They left without another word, their footsteps echoing in the hallway like funeral drums. Jennifer immediately began making notes, preparing for whatever legal escalation might follow. Tyler slumped against the wall, emotionally exhausted by the confrontation he'd witnessed. They finally admitted it, Jessica observed quietly. In their own broken way, they acknowledged what happened. Too little, too late, I replied, touching my scar reflexively. But at least it's on record now. They can't claim ignorance or misunderstanding. They know what they did. The apartment felt lighter somehow, as if their presence had carried physical weight that dissipated with their departure. Outside, life continued indifferent to family drama and medical neglect. But inside our small sanctuary, something had shifted. The prosecutor wants to meet Monday, Jennifer reminded us. This confrontation strengthens the case considerably. Their admissions, their threats, the obvious lack of remorse. It's textbook evidence. Will they really go to prison? Tyler asked, vulnerability creeping through his protective facade. Possibly, probably. Does that change your position? He thought carefully, then shook his head. They made their choices every day for 2 months. Now they face consequences. That's justice, not revenge. As afternoon faded to evening, messages poured in from unexpected sources. Former family friends expressing shock and support. Mom's charity board members offering assistance. Dad's colleagues questioning how they'd missed the signs. The perfect family image had shattered so completely that people were reevaluating everything they thought they knew about the Mitchells. You know what's strange? I said as Jessica prepared my evening medications. I feel free. For the first time in my life, I feel completely free. Because you're not maintaining their lie anymore, Tyler suggested. We spent our whole lives protecting their image. Now it's destroyed and we're still here, still breathing, still family, just different. Better, I corrected. Honest family, chosen family, the kind that shows up for surgery and recovery, not just photo opportunities. The article had done its work exposing truth to daylight where it couldn't be denied or diminished. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Radiation planning, legal meetings, the ongoing work of building a life apart from those who'd nearly ended it. But tonight was for processing the confrontation we'd all known was coming. They'd arrived in fury and left in defeat, denial finally cracking under the weight of published truth. The daughter they'd tried to silence had found her voice despite damaged vocal cords. The family they'd tried to perfect had found strength in accepting imperfection. The scar across my throat would fade but never disappear, a permanent reminder of the price of denial and the power of truth. I'd wear it proudly, evidence of survival against those who preferred comfortable lies to uncomfortable realities. Justice was coming, whether through courts or natural consequences. But healing had already begun, supported by chosen family who valued life over image, truth over comfort, love over conditions. That was more than enough. That was everything. 6 months later, I stood in Morrison Gallery adjusting the final photograph in my exhibition. Hidden Truths. A journey through medical neglect would open in 2 hours, the culmination of recovery reflection and reclaiming my artistic voice. The central image, a self-portrait taken 3 days after surgery, scar raw and dramatic across my throat, commanded the main wall. "It's powerful," Diana observed, stepping back to assess the complete installation. "Uncomfortable in all the right ways. People need to see this to understand how family denial can become deadly." My voice, though, permanently changed to a deeper register, carried clearly through the space. The vocal cord damage had altered my sound, but not my ability to speak truth. If anything, the raspiness added gravitas to words that might have been dismissed from a lighter throat. 20 minutes until the preview, Jessica announced, emerging from the back office where she'd been coordinating catering. "Tyler just texted. He's on his way with grandmother Eleanor." The past 6 months had transformed all of us. Tyler had grown into his role as protective brother, balancing football with family advocacy. Jessica had graduated nursing school with honors, her experience managing my recovery, inspiring specialization in patient advocacy. And I'd undergone radiation therapy, multiple follow-ups, and the slow work of building an independent life. The legal proceedings had moved with grinding inevitability. Mom and Dad pled guilty to reduced charges, misdemeanor child endangerment rather than felony medical neglect. The plea bargain included 2 years probation, mandatory counseling, and substantial fines. No prison time, but their reputations were thoroughly destroyed, their comfortable suburban life dismantled by their own choices. "Any word from them?" Diana asked carefully, knowing the exhibition invitation I'd sent against everyone's advice. "Nothing. Tyler says Mom's been in intensive therapy, actually doing the work. Dad, less so. He's still convinced everyone else is wrong." Dr. Montgomery had lost his medical license, his convenient diagnoses for wealthy friends finally catching up. The investigation revealed 17 other cases of falsified reports, a pattern of enabling parental neglect for social connections. He faced separate criminal charges, his golf club membership, poor compensation for professional destruction. The gallery began filling with early arrivals. Thomas Bradley appeared first, clutching a signed copy of the memoir I'd begun writing. The bookstore had already pre-ordered dozens of copies supporting my literary endeavors as enthusiastically as my photographic ones. "Florence, you look radiant," he said warmly, and I knew he meant it. The gaunt, dying girl who'd collapsed in his store had been replaced by someone stronger, scarred, but vibrant. Dr. Kumar arrived next, her presence always making me stand straighter. She'd saved my life with skilled hands and honest words, never sugarcoating the journey ahead. The cancer remained in remission, quarterly scans showing clear results, though we both knew papillary carcinoma could return years later. "Your scar healed beautifully," she observed with professional satisfaction, "and your voice has good resonance despite the nerve manipulation. You've exceeded my best expectations." "Because I had reasons to fight for," I replied, gesturing to the gathering crowd of chosen family. Grandmother Eleanor entered on Tyler's arm, moving slowly but determinedly. At 76, she'd become my fiercest advocate, using her retirement funds to ensure I never faced financial dependency again. The trust she'd established would see me through graduate school artistic endeavors and whatever future I chose to build. "Oh, my darling," she breathed, taking in the exhibition. "You've transformed pain into power. Margaret would be so proud." The photographs told our story chronologically. Diana's documentation of my decline, medical images of the tumor, post-surgical portraits showing healing progression. But interspersed were images of support: Jessica adjusting medications, Tyler sleeping in hospital chairs, Thomas organizing fundraisers, Diana fighting insurance companies. The narrative wasn't just neglect and survival, but community rising where family failed. "Is that them?" Tyler asked quietly, nodding toward the window. Outside, a familiar Mercedes idled at the curb. Through tinted windows, I could make out my parents' silhouettes, Mom in the passenger seat, Dad behind the wheel. They'd come, after all, drawn by invitation or curiosity, or perhaps genuine desire to understand what their denial had wrought. "They're not coming in," I realized as the car pulled away without stopping. "They came to see but not be seen." "Their loss," Tyler said firmly. "This is your night, your truth, your triumph." They chose comfortable distance over uncomfortable presence again. As the official opening approached the gallery filled with unexpected guests, nurses from the surgical ward, the EMTs who'd responded to my bookstore, collapse fellow cancer survivors who'd found courage in public testimony. The reporter, Amanda Wright, arrived with her editor, both committed to continuing coverage of medical neglect cases. "Your story opened floodgates," Amanda informed me. 17 families have come forward with similar experiences since the article ran. Parents who denied eating disorders, chronic illness, mental health needs, all to maintain perfect family images. You gave them permission to speak. The weight of that impact settled across my shoulders like a mantle. My personal fight had become a public catalyst, one family's dysfunction illuminating patterns throughout our image-obsessed community. The exhibition served not just as artistic expression, but as a beacon for others trapped in similar situations. Jennifer Carlson arrived fashionably late bearing news. "The prosecutor's office is establishing a task force on medical neglect. They want you as an advisory member, helping identify patterns and support victims. Interested?" "Yes," I answered without hesitation. If my experience can prevent one family from going through this, it's worth any discomfort. At 8 o'clock sharp, I stood before the gathered crowd to officially open the exhibition. My altered voice carried clearly through gallery acoustics, telling the story behind each image. The audience listened with rapt attention, some crying openly as I described the burning of medical documents, the family meeting that prioritized reputation over health, the gradual realization that survival meant severing toxic ties. "This scar," I said, touching my throat, "represents more than cancer surgery. It's evidence of choosing truth over comfortable lies, of finding family among strangers when blood relations fail, of surviving not just disease, but those who enabled its growth." The question and answer session that followed was intense but cathartic. Young adults asked about recognizing medical gaslighting. Parents questioned how to avoid similar denial. Healthcare workers sought guidance on identifying neglect disguised as overprotective parenting. "The key," I explained, "is believing people about their own bodies. When someone says they're in pain, believe them. When they point to physical symptoms, investigate rather than dismiss. Love means facing uncomfortable truths, not maintaining comfortable fictions." As the evening wound down, Tyler pulled me aside. "There's something you should see," he said, showing me his phone. "A text from Mom sent an hour ago. We sat outside for 30 minutes trying to find courage to enter. I'm sorry we failed again. Your exhibition looks beautiful through the windows. I'm in therapy learning to face truth. Maybe someday I'll be brave enough to face you. The article was right. We nearly killed you to avoid admitting imperfection. I'm working on becoming a mother who deserves a daughter like you. Mom." The message brought unexpected tears, though, whether from grief or hope I couldn't say. Change was possible even for those who'd spent decades in denial. But reconciliation required more than apologies. It demanded consistent action, genuine accountability, and respect for boundaries I'd established through pain. "Maybe someday," I told Tyler, "but not today. Today is for celebrating survival, not processing their journey toward accountability." The exhibition officially closed at 10, but conversations continued on the gallery steps. Support groups were forming contact information exchanged community building around shared experience of medical neglect. My personal tragedy had become collective action, isolated suffering, transformed into connected advocacy. Dr. Hayes appeared as we were leaving, pressing an envelope into my hands. "Your degree," she said simply. "The committee unanimously approved graduation with highest honors. Your thesis on art as medical documentation was groundbreaking." I clutched the diploma, this tangible evidence of achieving what nearly died with me. Despite cancer surgery, radiation, and family estrangement, I'd completed my education. The photography degree felt heavier than paper, weighted with everything survived to earn it. "What's next?" Jessica asked as we walked toward her car, my new apartment just blocks away. "Healing," I answered honestly. "Continued healing. The memoir advocacy work may be graduate school, building a life authentic enough to honor what almost killed me." "And your parents?" "They made their choices. Now they live with consequences while I live with freedom. If therapy genuinely changes them, maybe we'll find a path forward. But I won't sacrifice my truth for their comfort ever again." The drive home was quiet, each of us processing the emotional weight of the evening. The exhibition had been more than artistic success. It was public declaration of survival, testament to chosen families' power, evidence that truth could triumph over decades of denial. In my apartment, funded by grandmother Eleanor's trust and my own growing independence, I stood before the bathroom mirror. The scar smiled back at me, pink and permanent, beautiful in its honesty. 6 months ago, I'd awakened from surgery, uncertain if I'd survive. Now I was planning a future my parents' neglect had nearly stolen. My phone buzzed with messages from exhibition attendees, 3 young women facing similar medical denial seeking guidance, a father realizing he'd been dismissing his son's chronic pain, a nurse identifying patterns in families she'd thought were just difficult. Each message reinforced the unexpected truth. My suffering hadn't been meaningless. The tumor that nearly killed me had exposed toxic patterns throughout our community. The parents who denied my illness had inadvertently created an advocate for others facing similar neglect. "Thank you for sharing your truth," one message read. "My parents have been denying my lupus symptoms for 2 years, calling it attention-seeking. After seeing your exhibition, I'm seeking help regardless of their approval. You saved my life tonight." I smiled, touching the scar that marked my own salvation. Recovery wasn't just about surviving cancer or escaping toxic family dynamics. It was about transforming trauma into purpose, isolation, into community silence, into advocacy. The exhibition would run for 3 weeks each day, bringing new visitors, new stories, new connections between survivors. My photographs would speak when my altered voice grew tired, testifying to truths that comfortable lies couldn't erase. Tomorrow, I'd meet with the prosecutor's task force. Next week, radiation follow-up to confirm continued remission. Next month, the memoir's first chapters were due to the publisher who'd offered a contract based on the newspaper article. Life stretched ahead, scarred but possible different from what I'd planned, but perhaps more meaningful. To survival. I whispered to my reflection, raising an imaginary toast to everyone who'd made this moment possible. To Tyler, who chose truth over comfort. Jessica, who provided shelter and care. Diana, who documented what others denied Thomas, who called for help despite my protests. To Dr. Kumar, who cut out cancer with skilled hands. Jennifer, who fought legal battles. Grandmother Eleanor, who funded independence. And yes, even to my parents, whose spectacular failure had forced me to find strength they never thought I'd need. Their denial had nearly killed me, but surviving it had revealed reserves of resilience I never knew existed. The scar would fade, but never disappear. Good. Some stories demanded permanent reminders. Some truths required visible proof. I'd survived medical neglect, family betrayal, and cancer itself. That deserved recognition, even if it came in the form of damaged vocal cords and a line across my throat. Life after cancer, after neglect, after choosing truth over comfortable lies was different than expected, harder in some ways, easier in others. But it was authentically mine, supported by chosen family who saw reality clearly and loved me not despite my scars, but because of what they represented. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, continued healing, and opportunities to help others trapped in similar situations. But tonight was for gratitude. To be alive, to be free, to be surrounded by people who'd fought for my survival when those who should have didn't. The exhibition had asked viewers to see hidden truths, to recognize neglect disguised as protection, to understand how family denial could become deadly. Based on tonight's response, the message had been received. Lives would be saved because mine almost wasn't. Purpose had emerged from pain community, from isolation. Truth from lies. That transformation made every scar worthwhile. The one across my throat was just the most visible reminder of a journey from denial to acceptance, from silence to advocacy, from dying in darkness to living in light. Justice had come through legal channels and natural consequences, but healing, true healing, came from choosing to transform trauma into triumph, neglect into purpose, survival into service. My parents' comfortable lies had nearly killed me. My uncomfortable truths might save others. That was more than enough. That was everything. If you've ever been denied medical care or had your symptoms dismissed by family who should have protected you, I said to the camera during my closing remarks, know that you're not alone. Trust yourself. Seek help. Choose survival over their comfort. And please, like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more content about overcoming medical neglect and share it with anyone who might need to hear that their pain is real, their symptoms matter, and their life is worth more than someone else's reputation. Comment below with your own experiences. Let's build a community of survivors who refuse to be silenced. Thank you for listening to my story. May you find the strength to tell your own.